I'll call to order the City Council Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee at 5:31. And I would entertain a motion on our agenda.
I move the adoption of the agenda as posted.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Please
Aye.
Please say aye. Aye. So we have an agenda. Next item on our agenda is adoption of our minutes from the 12/17 meeting.
Adoption as posted.
All those in favor, give by saying aye. Aye. Next is public forum. Do we have anybody from the room? Here's our sheet. Anybody else want to be on the sheet? It isn't? We'll get on now. While we're doing that,
This gentleman right here is the first one.
you're doing while you're signing, I'm gonna call.
Yeah.
Ali Hamadine.
Yeah.
You can join us if you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, my name is Ali Hamadani from Ward 2, representative to the Battery Street redesign project. And just had a couple of thoughts. One was at the last meeting, I think it was suggested to have 2 or 3 parking spots in front of one of the stores. I think it's April now. I'm wondering about the safety of pedestrians with having parking there. If there's parking available on the other side of the building, I think that might be sufficient to have that reviewed. And the other is the crosswalks on the other intersections. Currently at the Pearl Street and Battery intersection, it's a 4-way walk signal. I forget the technical term for it, but if that seems to work really well at that intersection, and I'm wondering if all the future walk signals on other intersections could be signals too. That's all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ali. Next is April Cornell.
Should I just stand up there?
You can do that. You can join us. Whatever you're comfortable with. This is the speaker.
I'm April Cornell. I'm here with my son Kelly Cornell, who actually runs a lot of our facility and business. And I love this town. I love this city. I'm very proud of it, and I think it's a beautiful place. Our architecture is beautiful. The building stuff we have here is remarkable. We have a downtown that is famous throughout the country for its beauty, its pedestrian aspects. I feel as a citizen and business owner, I've really put my life in Vermont 30+ years into creating a community of beauty, a community of comfort. I see we don't have too many women here, but maybe if you talk to the women in your lives, you can find out what a special place that we have made. I don't want my business to go out of business because we're making a decision that is not connected to the women in our community. Many of whom, by the way, don't ride bikes. They're older. They go shopping. It's cold 6 to 8 months a year. Let's think a little bit about our proposals and make them work not only for this beautiful town, this wonderful state with the people who are so loyal and so incredibly invested in living here. Please think many, many, many times before making a change that we can go back on, before having construction was 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And businesses go on the business. You can only hang on for so long. You know, we went through COVID. We did it. You know, we stood up there. We opened as soon as we could. We made a safe environment. We made a good place. You gotta stick with us through this. You know, we're seriously, we are here for you. We are here for your partners. We are here for everybody. Let's just make sure that our places can still be there and be accessible. And it is not the easiest thing in the world to be a businesswoman for, by the way, 50 years this year. Please, we need your support. We have never asked before for the city to do something for us. Always been there for us. So that's, I just wanted to say that you can hear it from my heart. It's a beautiful town. Let's keep it that way. Let's do small things. Let's do them slow. It's okay. We've done so well doing that. You know? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Next, we have Steve Goodcom.
No. There's no mic?
No mic.
Okay.
There's not one there.
Right here for the
Yeah.
virtual.
Great. My name is Steve Goodkind, and I'm a member of Stop Biomass Vermont. I think many are familiar with us, and we're certainly doing everything we can do to reduce or eliminate emissions of CO2 from that meal plant. Came here tonight, now I see the audience, I'm glad I brought this at the last moment. We have a list of things that come from the district energy resolution, things we thought were either timelines weren't working or maybe some things were incomplete so far. We're gonna do our best to see if this thing can stay on track, because it is important to us that it succeeds. And I realize late this afternoon, I have to put it all together, that this is not a joint meeting of TEUC and BED. It's not BED at all. There's no BED here, so I shortened it down. What I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about only what I think is a TEUC responsibility. It may involve BED and others, but things that I think if we don't get off to a good track, I'm not sure when this thing does get off track. If you look at the resolution, it's numbers, you know, down the side. In sections, I think it's 120 through, I guess like 165. That's a section which specifically talks about the TEUC. It says the TEUC has been tasked by the City Council to collaborate with a whole bunch of stakeholders, including BED, and to put together some pretty important studies. Timeline's a little bit vague. Maybe a lot of the details are a little bit vague, but it's an area where the TEUC really has the responsibility. There's other areas of the resolution, you probably know, that ED or the general manager specifically said you got to do something. That's pretty clear. But I think what's happening in far is that I'll give ED a little bit of credit. He said try and attempt to do their share of it. But I don't think the TEUC can just let the tail wag the dog in this case. You do have responsibilities to put together this collaborative group of all these different stakeholders and to, I think, really run these studies. That doesn't mean BED doesn't contract for them, but to run them. And it seems like up till now, from what I've seen, if I missed something, I'm almost glad that I did, but I have. I think you've got to put together just at least some kind of simple plan. Take those sections of that resolution, you know, put it on paper. What is things you've got to do? Who's going to do them and when they got to get done? And then begin to track the thing over the next 1 to 2 years. Use that to report to the City Council. Use that to report to the public. Use that to help coordinate the various stakeholders so we all know what's going on. And I think it's something it's probably overdue at this point, but you have to do it. And I did notice that the BED did submit a report back in October. The deadline was November for it. And they mentioned some of these things, but then I'm thinking, wait a minute, but that's okay for them to try and do something with it, but it's really not their responsibility. They'll do a lot of heavy lifting, but the sections I described, you folks have to be in the driver's seat now. And we're pointing that out, but we do have some other things that we're concerned about, but I'm not gonna go through that here tonight, though. Actually, Adams may be on on Zoom to speak. She might mention some of those things, but I'm not sure she even realized that BD's not here. It's not BD's meeting. So I think it's just really important to put something simple together. It doesn't have to be rocket science, but a simple, I hate to use the word spreadsheet, but it can just be even a graphic, but something you can use every time, maybe every meeting, to check in at least on to see how things are going. And if there's really a hard deadline, you're demanding that something's been produced. And if something's not going right ahead of time, quite a bit ahead of time, this gets adjusted. I mean, what's the new deadline? If it requires any change either to the resolution or something from the council or a budgetary item, all these things are being looked at all the time. It doesn't take a lot of looking initially. But it seems right now that BD's grab the reins, they're running with it, all the power to them, but it's not their job. And in the end, I think it's not what the intent of the resolution was. It was meant to be that, well, they can be source of information, resources, expertise and whatever. It was the TEUC that was gonna be in charge of it. And I think you really got to grab the mantle here and go with that. I think if you look at it, you'll see you're actually behind right now on that already, but so that's a comment on this. I think you can do it. And the only thing I wonder about, I mentioned this when the resolution first came up, is do you have a staff that can even put something like that together? I don't know how you. But there's gotta be a way. It's not, this is not rocket science. I'm not looking for some kind of an engineering schedule. It might take some technical knowledge to put together. You draw it out, somebody who can put together a nice graphic could prepare it for you and just update it. It's not a big thing. I think you really need it, and you gotta put your stake in the ground there and say, we are in charge of this, and this is how it's gonna go. And do what you gotta do. All this thing goes nowhere. So, thank you. I think Ashley Adams, did she vote? Yeah, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next we have Jack Tiano.
I'm Jack Tiano, I live in Ward 5. I wanted to just come and talk briefly on the Battery Street scoping study. Not really on it in particular. Thank you. I mostly kind of want to use it as an example to kind of take a step back and look at how the transportation planning process is kind of failing us in the long term in Burlington overall. I think I wasn't on the PAC for this project. I kind of engaged with it as just a public citizen, but kind of the things that I found beneficial or kind of optimistic about where it could have gone, especially in regards to the active transportation infrastructure. Given that this is a project that really it's going to be a big expense, it's down the line, right? This is not in the next few years. This is something to get on the books, that we have a plan ready to go to look for funding. Probably a decade is kind of, I imagine, where this kind of project is, or beyond, right? So the 2030s. And so we're looking at this project that's kind of forward thinking for our city in terms of where we want to be, in quite some time from now, on especially active transportation. The biggest problem that I see in our transportation network is, or active transportation network is safety, and a lot of that safety comes from intersection management, right? The intersections are kind of the highest point of conflict, which makes walking and riding a bike and being active, moving around the city actively, dangerous and uncomfortable for the majority of people. Okay, so a lot of cities around the world are kind of stepping up and rethinking what their design manuals look like and how they tackle these kinds of projects. And one of the biggest things that we can do, too in the weeds, there was an opportunity to kind of lay out an idea of a protected intersection kind of on this project, to kind of look at what does Burlington in 2030, 2040 look like. That's the kind of infrastructure that I think that we should be looking at. Everyone that I brought this up to thought that it was a good idea and thought that it had merit and that it could be explored. But my problem that I'm trying to communicate is that the sequencing of the way that we do scoping studies and like the parts of the project that get allocated in the order that they happen made it so that in this case, that's probably not going to be on the table. Specifically because at this early phase, we kind of decided on a high level overview of like what side of the street the bike lanes are going. We've got this preferred alternative now. which has both of the bike lanes together, bidirectional on one side of the road, instead of kind of a more urban commuter style situation where you've got lanes on each side with traffic, right? Do that like almost like a multi-use recreational path situation. That type of path does not allow for the type of protected infrastructure, which again is not really even that much more expensive. It's just you need to think ahead in terms of how you're going to manage these intersections to make it safer for everybody to use those intersections. And it was my understanding that it was kind of a mix between like preemptively looking at potential costs or constructability or all of these different kind of factors that maybe you get down the line and it's actually close to put shovels in the ground and you make these decisions. But at this point, we kind of like preemptively said, it might be too hard to do that later. It might cost a lot of money later. We're not really sure. So we're going to go with what we think might be the cheaper option later. And we precluded the safest and most beneficial option for intersection design in the future. It's like, I really just kind of wanted to bring this up as like a weird, specific, like wonky case where I've been seeing this throughout all the transportation planning projects where there's all these like little details that we're not really thinking about or planning for or keeping in mind in terms of how all the sequencing plays out to the point where today, 2025, we're probably locking in subpar infrastructure for 15, 20 years from now. And like, that just to me doesn't seem like that's any way to get to the type of city that we want to have, that we kind of lay out in a lot of our big picture, long-term goal documents and the things we vote for when we're voting for mayors and city councilors and the ideas that we're kind of pitching what kind of city we want to be. There's like these really, I don't know, people like me who go to really detailed meetings and think about infrastructure planning policy. Not the majority of people. It's like, I'm just trying to like raise awareness that like, until we kind of really dig in and rethink how we're dealing with these processes and thinking about where funding sources come from and what is making us go through these processes that are yielding bad results, we're probably not going to get anything significantly better. And I think if we don't get anything significantly better, we're not really set up to handle the transportation system of a growing Burlington that meets the climate goals that we've set for ourselves. So it kind of has long-ranging implications, and again, it's hard to situate the minutiae with the big picture. Trying to I have a problem with the project. It's happening everywhere all the time, and it's driving me crazy. So
Next. Is it Andy Truly? Tracy, okay.
Hi, I'm Andy. I live in the North End. I'm not gonna have the detail Jack has. I did want to like commend the options that were proposed and the options that were selected for the Battery Street project. I thought it was a nice mix of the various interests of bikers, pedestrians, and car traffic. And I was excited to see that be selected as the option. But I also would advocate, there are things that could always be improved and tweaked on this. So hopefully we can take on myself. This is like a plan now, but in the future we could, similar to Jack's point, like improve on this. But I feel like it's a very good first step to get us going in a good direction.
Hans Van Rees.
Good evening, good to be here. My name is Hans Van Rees. I represent Westport Hospitality. We operate Hotel Vermont and the Courtyard Burlington Harbor Hotel. And first of all, to commend this group on work done and by the RBC as well on the earlier sessions that we participated in and provided input. Here mostly today to actually point out a correction that's needed that's in the option 2, and I've spoken with Jason, and I think it's on the record, but I just want to make sure it pertains to an area that's currently marked as fire lane on Battery Creek or the hotel, and that area was identified as not needed as a fire lane and was going to be converted to a delivery area, delivery lay-by, and the drawing it shows for us. So want to make sure we get that back on the books as discussed. The second part, it's more of an aesthetic perspective, and Battery Street is, to me, is, I live in Burlington as well. I work downtown, but I live in Ward 6, and Battery Street to me is the Champs-Élysées of Burlington. It's, you know, it's a terrific location of the street with terrific lake views in the winter. Except in the summer, you don't, as a pedestrian and as a bicyclist or maybe cars less. You know, if you traverse that area, you walk that area, you can't see the lake, it's all fully grown. And I'd like us to think about ways to where we can create few sheds or few corridors. And I know with an embankment, and there's a lot of work with, you know, root structure, foundation and so on, but I feel there's the solutions for that, and to where those using Battery Street can really enjoy the full effect of it, which is the most spectacular close location to the lake from, you know, perched on a higher setting. So, and I don't know if that fits in this discussion or we talk about that more. I did point it out in the earlier design discussions that Mark to drawings just, you know, creating a few sheds, but I just wanted to sort of mention that again today. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Alex. Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to speak at public forum? Seeing none, we'll go online. It looks like Ashley Adams has her hand raised. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you for taking my comment. My name is Ashley Adams. I'm a Burlington Electric ratepayer and a member of Stop Vermont Biomass. I appreciated seeing the accountability list on the consent agenda for last night's City Council meeting. The spreadsheet is a record of resolutions and communications that have come to the council with action requested. But I noticed that the district energy steam pipe resolution that passed November 20th, 2023 was not on the list. And that resolution contained, as you know, a series of requirements and deadlines. When you review the resolution, you'll see that Burlington Electric has missed deadlines and has failed to fulfill specific requirements. And I'd like to highlight that General Manager Springer was tasked with studying the quote potential, and this is from the resolution, potential timeframes of plans to transition away from the need for conventional wood chip combustion as a significant power source for the city of Burlington, including but not limited to the possibilities of repowering the McNeil plant with different fuels that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Instead, General Manager Springer submitted his October 15th report, which doesn't do what the resolution requires. What it does provide is so flawed that it should have been rejected, in my opinion. The repurposed study that General Manager Springer provided overestimates the amount of power by a multiple of 4 because it fails to account for the fact that McNeil runs less than half the time, and it also ignores the fact that Burlington only gets credit for half of the output as a 50% owner. Additionally, the study entirely omits hydropower from the analysis. Don't know why it does that. I and many other members of the public were, of course, opposed to the steam pipe, still am, and not supportive of the studies of the resolution, in large part because Burlington Electric has proven to be an unreliable source for accurate, unbiased studies. And frankly, ratepayers are just tired of footing the bill for ongoing distractions when what we really need is a plan to shut the plant down. I'd also like to point out just briefly that General Manager Springer called the district energy project a shovel-ready project, and yet it hasn't happened yet. Vermont Gas, the primary beneficiary of the steam pipe, is unlikely to see clean heat credits now that the clean heat standard is not moving forward. A Burlington Electric filing with the PUC advised that the steam pipe was on hold, awaiting a determination on the clean heat credits that Vermont Gas would earn. And I'd like to point out that I really think that this community deserves to know whether this project is moving forward. So I'd really appreciate an answer to that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley. Anyone else online who would like to speak in public forum? Please indicate by raising your hand or using the raise hand function. Not seeing anybody. I'll ask one more time in the room. If there are no takers, Doesn't look like there is. We'll go ahead and close public forum. Thanks, everybody, for your comments tonight. And we'll open our deliberative agenda. And the first item is the GMT FY26 assessment and special assessment. And, yeah. Waiting's on. Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Waiting. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I thought I could make it back in time for my last appointment, but was unable to, so sorry to have to join you virtually. And so there's a lot of different items that we can talk about today. Certainly the assessment and the special assessment are things that I'm eager for your input on to have a discussion around. Also, we have some information about potential changes in service that will be coming out of our service reductions that we are navigating. One of the things I did want to let this group know is that the governor's budget, of course, was released today. And I'll be meeting with VTrans tomorrow to get an idea of what is included in Green Mountain for Green Mountain Transit in that budget. And that will really let us know sort of what the baseline will be for potential reductions in June. We have I can also provide an update on the question around rural transfer and whether GMT should be able to should continue to be both urban and rural agency. But I think that it sounds like we should dive into the discussion about assessments first. Does that make sense to you, Chair Barlow?
It does.
Okay.
So go ahead. Did you have any material to present, or we just? There's nothing attached to the agenda. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so we don't have any handouts from this time. I know that the last time that we met, there was a handout that Chapin had provided that was that showed the different assessment options. And let me see if I can pull that up and share my screen.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And I will take just a moment.
Wayne, you can pull them up whenever it makes sense to in the course of your presentation. If there's a narrative you want to go ahead and do that first.
Well, then we'll go ahead and let's talk about the special assessment first. And so the special assessment, as we went over before, is something that we haven't done before. We think it may be the first time in our history that we've tried to do a special assessment. We're not 100% certain about that. And so folks can remember that in order for a special assessment to be binding on our urban members, all urban members have to vote to approve it. I can tell you that we've had 3 of the 8 members vote already on it, and all have approved, with the town of Essex voting to approve it last night at their select board meeting. The special assessment in total would be $308,000 for all of GMT Urban, with the portion for Burlington at $170,000. The assessment would be used for 3 items. It would be used primarily for driver buyouts, so $240,000 would be used for driver buyouts. 50,000 would potentially be set aside for CCRPC. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Set aside for assessment reform, which we'll be doing with CCRPC. And then the last bit would be helping urban cover the cost of lobbying. And so, as we discussed before, GMT really needs to have a lobbying presence at the State House. What I will say since the last time I've been here is that we are going to be partnering with CCRPC on the assessment reform. That means that it's likely that our cost to do the assessment reform will be less than $50,000. We also are not certain that the Teamsters, the union that represents our urban drivers, is going to be willing to negotiate a buyout. Early indications are that they would actually rather have a layoff than a buyout, and we could talk a little bit about that if you'd like. But the reason why I bring this up is that in order for the special assessment to be binding, not only do we have to have each of the municipalities vote to approve it, but we would need to incur these expenses. And so what that means is that at this time, we're not sure that we're going to be able to do a buyout. And so we may not need that $240,000 to do that activity. So I think that this means that I'm not able to provide you with certainty right now about how much we will need from the special assessment. So it's still very much up in the air. And I'd be happy to take any questions you may have now about the special assessment before we talk about the regular assessment.
Clayton, this would go on what I'll call a splinter tax. And it would be very helpful, assuming the worst case scenario of all of the numbers adding up. What would that translate to in terms of an increase in taxes?
That's I see that my good friend Robert Golding was kind enough to send me the handout from our last meeting, and I am going to open it now and share the screen so that you can see that. Thank you, Robert. And let's see. Okay. And so
I don't have my binoculars. Could you like help me out?
This is like an eye test.
I have failed miserably.
all right. And so looking at the different options, what you could see is that option one would be the maximum. And so that is the 2.28 there under option one. And
That
then what?
I'm sorry, Clayton, and maybe it's not in, I'm not seeing it in the chart, but I think that in addition to the chart would be the number of cents on the tax rate, because everybody's house is valued differently. And so the impact is going to be different. And this is something that we particularly this year need to be factoring into all of the revenues that we're raising.
So wouldn't you assess like a dollar amount and then we would translate that?
However that's going to work, I think it's important for all the bodies that are seeing this request to be able to see it translated into, is it cents per thousand? Cents per hundred?
And so I do want to apologize, Councilor Bergman, that I recall at our last meeting that you had desired to have that listed, and I'm sorry that we had not procured that and provided that for you. But noted the second time, and we'll make sure that when we present this in the future that we coordinate with the city so that we can have that translated into how that will impact the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Well, I know that we'll get back into it, this point. When we raised the public safety tax, 1 cent on the public safety tax raised about between $670,000. And so if that's 170, it's like some fraction of that.
The grand list is raised, so
Right,
I think that we need to.
I agree with you.
Just need to get that.
Just think about it as an order of magnitude.
And what you are able to see across the different options is that the range is the highest of 2.28 and the lowest is 2.017. So there is about a $260,000 range there that would be the difference between the different assessment options. And would you like me to continue to share this, or should I stop so that I can see you all?
Are there any other questions on the special assessment? from councilors? I had one. Do you know what the timeline is on the driver buyout decision?
Yes, and so I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other. And so that will be, if we do need to have a reduction in force, it will be happening in June of 2025. And so we would have to negotiate prior to then.
Sooner is better, obviously, but I mean, it's for you too, so you know what's going on, but, okay, thank you.
Just as a follow-up, Clayton, besides the TEUC, are you working with the CAO's office and the mayor's office in terms of the budget implications? Again, the related to my first question is we need to be putting all this together in front of them as we are making a decision. We've got bonds that we've just put on the ballot. We have a council that is going to be looking at how we are going to minimize the impact on taxpayers. And so the vote wouldn't go to the voters, but it would go to the council, and we need to just put all these numbers together. And so that is also a request of mine, that you make sure to be working very closely with the CAO, Catherine Chad, and the mayor as this budget process is developing.
Absolutely. I know that Catherine is the person that receives our assessments from GMT. So she has received this information already. And one of the things that I really love about our board is having Chapin, kind of have the dual role of in his role with the city, as well as being on the GMT board. And I appreciate the work that he's been able to do in coordination as well with the mayor's office.
They're briefed, and yes, it is part of the mix, and Catherine has the FY26 request.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Clayton, continue.
Okay. And so one of the things that we need to decide on is whether we want to continue to have your annual assessment fund fare free service on our number 11. And so just for background for folks who are there tonight that may not be familiar, the GMT's urban number 11 route goes from the downtown transit center off of Cherry Street, and then it goes to the University of Vermont Medical Center, goes to Dorset Street and the University Mall, before then traveling through parts of South Burlington and going to the airport. And so right now, the portion of that route that goes through Burlington is fare free. This is paid for by the city of Burlington in their assessment. And so we need to revisit that discussion that we've had before, whether this is a policy priority for the city council in light of our new, more equitable fare system that I can tell you we're starting to get our initial data on the fare system on how things are going, and really happy to see that we have not seen a decrease in ridership since our return to fares. In fact, we've had a tiny increase. We also are able to get data on the number of folks, or actually the number of rides that are done with our fare capping, and seeing that that system is in place and is protecting folks from having to pay more than a certain amount. And so the question then really becomes is whether it's a good investment for the city of Burlington to continue to have that route be fare free. I think that from our perspective, we're not eager to lose the local match. However, I think that our new system that we have is a much better system, and one that I think some of the concerns that we may have had in the past about access I'm not sure are as relevant today. And so happy to have the discussion with you all about whether we should continue this practice.
I just have some context that may be helpful for the deliberation, if friendly, and that is that in talking with the administration and with GMT, GMT is looking at some service adjustments that may dramatically change the Route 11. And so one thought is that we continue with the status quo and continue as the Route 11 in Burlington is fare free over the next couple of months, because as General Manager Clayton Clark said, there are very likely service changes happening or recommended to be happening in June, the extent of which will depend on the state and the legislature's support of public transit over the coming months. But instead of struggling with the policy decision now, let's see where the service goes and then reevaluate at that time. That would be staff's recommendation.
So I'm looking at the table that we just had, and it's got options 1 through 4, and the College Street shuttle is set out, and there are different amounts for the different options. Well, there are actually 2 amounts depending on the options. 1 and 3 are the same. It's the 243, and option 2 and 4 are for 151. So if you could be so kind as to integrate these numbers here with what you were saying, Chapin, that would be really helpful. And also trying to just be clear about the differences in the amounts that we're seeing here in terms of the options, since I think that this relates to the question of what we decide to recommend.
Right, the College Street shuttle assessment here is showing is around $243,000. That is both the payment for the service as well as the foregone fares, since it's fare free. So what I am recommending is that we proceed.
And the 151, I'm sorry, but just
the 151 would just be the payment for the base service if fares were charged, because the city then would not need to pay for the foregone fares since the public was paying for those. So
it's not a fare, it's still a route, but it's not a fare free route.
Correct.
Thank you.
So what I'm proposing here is to proceed with the 243, which would be to continue with fare free service at least for the next 4 months, while GMT determines whether or not Route 11 is going to be substantively reimagined. Because if it is reimagined and that service is placed on other existing routes that already have a fare, that decision is already going to be made. Yep. Depending on how those hours of service are redeployed and or cut.
And for additional context, we know that VTrans has previously identified the number 11 as one of the routes that they would like to see us modify. Also, they would like us to modify the number 10, which is operates outside of Burlington, connecting Essex Junction to Williston, and the number 8, which is the city loop that operates within Burlington. And one of the reasons why we asked Chris Damiani to be with us tonight was if you did have some questions about how things may be changing depending on our budgetary situation, he can walk you through a very high level of what we're looking at in the coming months.
Clayton, I just wanted to ask, last summer when we were talking about Route 11, and I had brought up that I personally thought it should not be fare free, and we were looking at the transition to the app, and we were talking about, since it was a fare free route, there was really no way for you to get accurate numbers on usage. And so I'm just wondering where we're at did we ever figure out a way to sort of track how heavily used it is? And then can that translate into what that would be for revenue were we to change it to a charged route?
And so, Councilor Lim, I'm really glad that you asked that, because we are frustrated with the fact that we don't have the data on the fare-free portion of 11 the way we do the other parts of our service. And so one of the things that's critical for us is, for example, knowing how much of the people who are using the number 11, say, may be covered by an unlimited access agreement with the university, and how many of them would be people that would need to pay fares. And right now, we just don't know, because all we know is the total number of riders, since it's a fare-free service.
And so what is that total number in kind of and if you could give me an idea of in relation to some of our other more traveled routes as well? I know it's probably peaks at particular times of the year, but.
And so I'm going to look that up, but if Chris Damiani happens to know that off the top of his head, I wouldn't
Yeah,
mind.
so I'll give some context of so Chris Damiani, Director of Planning, GMT. So for context, so the number 1 Wilson route and the number 2 Essex Junction route are the 2 most popular GMT routes. On a monthly basis, particularly when the colleges are in session, those run about 50 to 60,000 folks a month. The number 11, off the top of my head, it's much smaller compared to those numbers, you know, probably multitudes of 2 or 3, much smaller number. And to the other point earlier, even with the fare system right now, as Clayton said, there isn't a lot of data that we can get on that. And just to put into a broader context, since we've launched fares since May of 2024, 40% of all of our rides are covered by some sort of agreement. So whether that's universities, whether that's an individual business that is partnered with GMT, a number of other sort of agreements that we have with the Burlington School District and so forth. A lot of the rides are covered by those other agreements, and then another 48% are covered by sort of general public riders.
And just one last follow-up, and then I'm actually all set. And this may be just sort of a gut take from you based on that you look at these numbers fairly regularly. Would you say that because the 11 route is kind of like a snake that goes through a lot of areas, would you say the bulk, would you venture to guess that the bulk of 11 travel is probably between the hospital and downtown?
Yeah, so back in the day, it was, I think, from what I remember, it was like around 55% of the rides basically happened in that corridor. Recognizing that there are, you know, as I mentioned, the route 2 does go to the hospital already,
right,
every 20 minutes, much more frequently than the number 11 does, which right now runs every 45 minutes.
And the 1 goes right
on Main Street.
near it
Yeah,
too,
exactly. So it's about a third of a mile from the major UVM stop to the hospital that way. So it's covered in a lot of ways as well.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful for me. Thank you.
And I do have some ridership numbers that we can share. And so if you're looking at as we heard from Chris, the number 1 and the number 2, if you annualize those rides, the number 1 is right around 500,000 rides. The number 2 is a little over 400,000 rides, where the number 11 is a little over 100,000 rides. So about a quarter of the overall ridership of, say, the number 2, and about a fifth of the overall ridership of the number 1.
Thanks, Clayton.
I guess my questions, Clayton, revolve around, I guess, the uncertain future of routes like specifically the number 11 and the number 8. Just going off of the original draft service reduction plan for FY26, where are we on that decision? Is the elimination of the number 11 and the number 8 still on the table?
And so what I would say at this point in time, unless there's very surprising numbers with the governor's budget, I think that the elimination of the 8 and 11 are going to be off the table. My hope is that for the number 8, what we would see is a reduction from 30-minute service to hourly service if we need to make a reduction there. And then for the 11, getting to the point that was just discussed, the modifications would likely be more on the South Burlington end than the Burlington end, because that's where we're seeing the ridership numbers dipping.
Thank you. I guess I'll say that I personally want to dig in more to the ridership numbers myself before I can firmly give my opinion on the 11. I've heard data just now tonight that would lead me in both directions. I'd say from a base level, I think I do see importance in us in Burlington having a fare free bus route that brings people right from our downtown to our hospital. But again, I've heard interesting data that would lead me in both sides. So thank you.
Thank you.
Clayton, I had a sort of a general question. It's like when we talked before, I think you mentioned you're about $1.5 million short on your budget right now, the way you have it mapped out. Is that accurate still?
It's about 1.2 million right now.
0.2 million.
And
if we were able to get the legislature, if the legislature was able to find that funding, would there be no service reductions and you'd be able to unwind those plans by June?
So if we were to get the 1.2 million, there would be the potential for no further service reductions. That would not restore the service that has already been reduced. I can tell you that there are some reductions that we think probably need to be made because they reflect changes in ridership that have happened over the years. And for example, one of the things that we're looking at is that during the summer months with the schools out, there is a sharp drop in ridership. And so the question then is that do we continue to offer the same level of service that's really designed, to meet the need for the 10 months of the year that the colleges are in session, during that 2-month time. And so those are the types of things that I think that you would see changes. But the good news about those types of changes is that you wouldn't see us, cutting off a geographic area. It would be potentially, less frequent service would be a modification. And so, but you wouldn't see a service going away. My hope is that we're able to get enough funds this session so that we don't see any route eliminations. But there's one route in specific that doesn't run through Burlington. It is the number 10 that I mentioned before, that will be difficult for us to save. But my hope is to be able to avoid that as well.
Thank you for that. I mean, my fear, and I think it's probably the fear of others here, is that as we decrease frequency, I think it'll decrease ridership because it's less convenient.
Yes.
And so you're sort of in this death spiral.
Yes.
And that's what I worry about. I mean, if we're going to meet our goals in the city, we need to have a robust GMT service here.
Yes.
And so, we've always tried to help you to be that. And if there's any help that we can provide this session as well, I would offer that on behalf of the committee. I'm sure we'd be happy to help advocate in any way we can for that.
Thank you.
I do think though that there's something to be said for what Clayton was saying about that nimbleness that we need to reevaluate based on, rider shifts that occur over long periods of time. And so we know that the number 10 route, which isn't even in Burlington, is very minimally used. And so I certainly, as a Burlington ratepayer, don't want to be subsidizing routes that maybe don't need to be there. Just as much as Essex taxpayers don't want to be subsidizing Burlington routes that they're not using. So I do think we do need to be looking at how do we make a really efficient bus service while as Clayton pointed out, not cutting off geographic areas, particularly the Route 8 city loop is a sensitive topic, and I appreciate that we're at least able to keep that at 1 hour, but if we need to move the 11 to be a more straightforward route or reduce how far it goes. We were talking about micro transit to the airport because no one was really riding it to the airport with all their luggage. You know, we can look at what is the cost of micro transit versus continuing to run an unprofitable bus line that we're subsidizing at a rate of free. So this is the year where we're going to have to make really hard decisions on the FY26 budget, and I don't think some of these things are gonna rise to the top of the pot, so to speak. And when we say we're gonna have to make hard decisions, this is gonna be one of them. So that's all I'll say there, that I would like to see us preserve as much geographic coverage and routes as possible, while also, particularly for areas where folks are lower income and very dependent on the bus, or students for that matter, but I'm not sure I would support 11 continuing to remain free, and I said that last summer as well.
Other comments, go ahead.
Clayton, I'd like to get your opinion on the topic of micro transit. What do you think would be better for ensuring consistent service? Would it be retaining the regular sized buses at reduced loops or lag times, or would it be for less routes that are not as productive, but people still are consistently taking them and rely on them, like potentially the 11, for times where times of day where ridership is low, keeping the lag times at as many as possible, a half hour, 45 minutes, but making the vehicle smaller. What would you say is more valuable to GMT?
Well, one of the things that I'm happy that we'll be doing is doing a study of combining our ADA service with microtransit. And that's a trend that's happening in other parts of the country. And so just for background information, we are required to provide a door-to-door paratransit service for folks who have a disability that keeps them from riding our fixed route. This is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is a service that presently is contracted with SSTA to do that service. And so one of the things that other transit agencies have found is that by combining paratransit to microtransit, it can be more cost effective than doing microtransit alone. I think that there are certain areas, the airport is a perfect example of a service that would be better served, I think, by microtransit than it would be by fixed route. I think that the real devil in the details is going to be, microtransit is not cheap, and so we would have to really have a good understanding, just to your point of, hey, when is the cost actually more to do microtransit, and when is it more to do fixed route, so that we would be able to use the right decision making. I can tell you that there is a labor relations component with this, in the sense that we can't appear to be contracting out services that are currently being performed by our union staff, so that is something that we will have to navigate. But I do think that there is, looking into our future, that we are going to want to explore microtransit. I think especially as we look at meeting the needs both of our commuters, but the needs of folks who are using our service to access, say, healthcare and human services. And so I think that that's something where those don't always match up. And so, for example, one of the things that concerns me most about losing, say, the number 10 that we talked about, is that those folks who right now have that as their only option for accessing human services and healthcare. If that goes away, they have no other, real option. And but from VTrans's perspective, it's not efficient service. And so, I think that there may be times when we need to think about service that's not economically efficient for other values and other priorities. And one of the things that we haven't talked about much, and I don't necessarily think that we want to dive into here, is that GMT, has created an affiliated nonprofit. And I think that looking out in the future, that it would make sense for that nonprofit really to sort of have a focus on, fundraising and doing efforts to connect those folks that are left behind our fixed route service.
Thank you, Clayton. I'll end, I guess, by agreeing with Chair Barlow about just as it is important that we are preserving the geographic area, I would, from how I understand it, in running our routes less makes our bus service less convenient, and that is how we lose riders that we may not get back when you potentially reach a financial position that we can even more readily provide that service. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add, I mean, maybe we can keep a route like 10 if we're charging for 11, but if we're not charging for 11, which is quite heavily used, at least in that first section from downtown to the hospital, we're losing revenue that could be used to connect people to health and human services. One thing that I would like to see maybe at a future meeting is an overlay map of all of our routes with US Census income data, and to start to see sort of what would the impacts be from an equity standpoint. So if for 11, if we have a free route 11, I'm just like throwing this out here, but we have a free route that's running through an area that tends to have a higher income, but we're looking at cutting routes on the 8 route that it goes through areas of very low income. Is that an equity-based approach? So maybe at a future meeting down the road, we could look at that, and I think that's relatively easy to do with ArcGIS or something like that. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say all of this to me, the suggestions are made, speaks to the need for a pretty vigorous in community engagement and planning process. And so when Jack is talking about the future, it's important for us to sort of step back and say, well, what is a vibrant mass transit system in the city of Burlington and the cities of Winooski and South Burlington and Shelburne? How does it all fit, given what we are going to be trying to build on the ground with housing, with businesses, with services? What's the relationship to not only the infrastructure we're building, but the regulatory overlay, that transportation demand management system, those transportation options? And so it's great to have Chris here because he's like the planner. And all of these give us the opportunity for us to say, what's a system that we need? Because if we don't, and that we need and want, because otherwise we are on a death spiral. There is absolutely no doubt that the status quo is not, we don't have a system, a transportation system here. We've got buses, with some routes. So we need to try to integrate that and use the fiscal crisis that we have as the opportunity to make that engagement. And so we've been talking about this in this committee for a long time, particularly the attempt to link GMT to bigger employers and include housing developers in a much more vigorous way. And I think that what we're seeing. If we do that in the context of these choices, we will, I think, be realizing the potential we have got. And if we don't, I think we miss the opportunity. And I'm sure, let me just finish by saying, I'm sure that if we do it right and bite off what we can actually chew, that the people in Montpelier will appreciate that we're doing that as well. And there may be possibilities through VTrans, through the legislature. So thank you.
Chair, can I just ask Clayton one more question before we?
Yeah, we need to wrap this.
I figured as much, and it's a really quick one. We received a presentation from UVM Medical Center, and in that they talked about how they're committing to buying public transit passes for all of their employees going forward. Does that have any positive impact on where we're at financially, or how does that look?
Absolutely, and so I want to thank the city of Burlington for thinking about Green Mountain Transit when working with the medical center on their parking situation, and having a requirement that that they consider transit for their staff. That would definitely be more local match funding for us that would be helpful. It means less that we would need from you all. At least at this time, the unlimited access agreement funds is better than fares when it comes to being local match. And so I do see that as important. I can tell you that one of the things that I am worried about with our unlimited access agreements is that, and this is coming to us because of the data that we have now on our new fare systems, that we may be undervaluing the price of our unlimited access agreements. That especially when we heard from Chris about, about 40% of our riders are using an unlimited access agreement, and I'm not sure that our agreements are generating the revenue appropriate for the ridership. And so that is something that we're going to have to make sure that we are valuing our service and not sort of giving it away.
Well, thank you for coming back. I'm sure it's not the last time we're gonna see you between now and June, Clayton.
Yeah, and I so appreciate the fact that all of you are really committed to GMT. I appreciate working with you. It's been it's very interesting times, and like I can just tell you, real quickly, I know that you want to move on. Like we've spent the day trying to figure out if the new executive order, halting federal payments, impacts us. We are going to need to be doing some changes in practices because of the new federal administration, and so we may want to talk to you all about that as well.
Right.
You're supposed to leave us on a happy note. But thank you. We really appreciate you coming, and we'll continue this conversation.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye, Clayton. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Battery Street scoping study preferred alternative presentation.
Great, we've got both staff representation here with Julia Ursaki. Thanks for attending, Julia, a little under the weather and making sure to keep us all healthy. And then we have a great partnership with the CCRPC and Jason Jarrett and Drew from VHB. And so I don't know how you all are launching the presentation, but I'll leave it to you all.
Sure. Julia, did you want to introduce anything? Not happy.
Sure.
Let you know that it's a night off.
Yes, so we have been working on this Battery Street scoping study over the past, I think, 2 years now, with the CCRPC and VHB. We've done lots of public participation and analysis, and we've come to what I think is a really great long-term vision for Battery Street, and Drew from VHB is going to take us through this presentation. It'll be about 15 minutes, and then we can have plenty of time for discussion and questions afterwards.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, just introduce myself, Drew Gingeris with VHB. We're kind of the consulting firm. I'm the project manager representing us. Joined obviously by Jason, the CCRPD to my left here. As Julia said, I'm going to try and get through this in about 15 minutes. I believe the intention there is to leave about 25 minutes for questions. So I will be moving somewhat efficiently, but we can of course come back to anything that I mentioned. With that, just a quick overview of what I'm going to get into. We're going to just quickly recap the project purpose and need, share with you kind of the public engagement process we went through, our advisory committee, get into the alternatives development process, some additional analysis and refinement we did at the request of advisory committee members, and concluding with what we have, we think to be the best option for the corridor that we're calling the recommended preferred alternative. I'll apologize in advance, I'm getting over a little bit of a cough, so I have to take some water breaks. Slow me down. So again, as Chapin just mentioned, this project is a partnership between the city and the CCRBC. Jason has been leading it on the RBC end, Julia and Philip Peterson on the city end, and then I've been supported by a staff, a team of colleagues that is far greater than the two names on the screen, but primarily supported by two colleagues, Karen Sentoff and Elizabeth Sundberg, both of whom many of you might be familiar with. We had a pretty expansive advisory committee for this effort. A little bit of turnover just given the project length, but still everyone, including Councilor Bergman here with us tonight, has been very engaged throughout the whole process. Chris as well is here. We did, we'll get into the rest of the meetings later, but this is just a good look at kind of the diverse group we had, made up of councilors, the city engineer, formerly Norm, now Laura, Terry Rivers, Barbie, Ali here as well. Local motion representation, Sophie from Burlington Parks Rec and Waterfront, and BBA as well as REIB representation between Pitt and County. Quick overview of the purpose of this study. The purpose of this is really an all-encompassing kind of long-term vision streetscape. I think just to clarify, a lot of these projects get identified as bike projects, and I think it's important to note that this project is not by any means bike exclusive. It is focused on improving the corridor end-to-end, right-of-way line to right-of-way line to improve safety and accessibility for all modes of transportation, to create an equitable, safe, low-stress, and accessible transportation route along Battery Street and across it, regardless of age, ability, or mode of travel. In line with the full purpose and needs statement, these were the 5 needs identified. As you can see at the top, they are in no particular order, but safety for all users is really kind of the highest priority of this effort. Looking at improving comfort and accessibility for pedestrians along Battery Street, providing bicycle facilities end to end, as well as connections to the surrounding facilities and street network, integrating street ecology and kind of the Great Streets Initiative best practices into Battery Street's overall future design, and then making sure we're providing acceptable mobility for all modes of transportation along Battery Street, as it is a pretty critical commuter route for folks who travel by motor vehicle. Here. Is this the same jacket? Yeah. So a quick recap of kind of our public involvement and community engagement process. We had 2 large-scale public meetings, this TEUC meeting as well, not included in that. So this would be our 3rd kind of public offering. Of course, all of our advisory committee meetings are open to the public as well. We had 4 of those. Additionally, we had 10 targeted outreach events. So these were either engagement with the school district or tabling events at local establishments such as King Street Laundry. I believe Jason and a colleague of mine, at one point tabled at the intersection of Cherry Street and Battery Street to get input from folks walking by. And then we had an extremely successful online survey and mapping tool that I think we saw upwards of 500 responses to. that really informed a lot of what you see here tonight. Some of those key takeaways in line with our kind of purpose and need, those top three, folks want a safer Battery Street. I believe it was Plan VTV Walk Bike in 2017 that identified Battery Street as a top 5 most uncomfortable or makes me feel the most unsafe street in the city. So a lot of what we heard aligns with that prep past outreach and engagement that was done as part of that effort. In addition to kind of those 3 bullets that align with the purpose and need statement for the project, we also heard a desire for improved transit accommodations, a better community connectivity, and then just general streetscape improvements to kind of increase, improve the beauty of the street, update it, you know, and again, keep it in line with those great streets standards. So from that kind of community engagement, we jumped right into developing alternatives that were in line with our purpose and need. We took a look at 2 alternatives, and then you'll see based on a request from our advisory committee, we also looked at a 3rd alternative that represents a bit of a hybrid alternative, a combination between alternative 1 and alternative 2. The kind of most significant defining factor between the 2 alternatives is the bike facility. A lot of the same elements of each alternative are mentioned here. But for the most part, the idea was to obviously maintain or improve existing pedestrian infrastructure block to block, and really improve pedestrian signal operations at the intersections. We got a lot of feedback on lengthy wait times, long crossings. A lot of that aligned with other improvements that are carried through the study. For those that might not be familiar, the term road diet, another term for that, or way to think about it, is just reduction in the number of travel lanes along the corridor. A lot of input we received was that Battery Street feels over-designed. You know, it's a 4-lane road from Main Street up to Pearl Street. It's 2 lanes south of that and 3 lanes north of that. So look at, you know, we went into a very detailed traffic operations analysis and mitigations to make sure that with the additional improvements we were considering at the intersections for pedestrians as well as bicyclists, that kind of 5th need statement, maintaining acceptable mobility for all users is still going to be achievable. So again, the defining characteristic though between the 2 alternatives was the bike facility. Alternative 1 represents a corridor that includes what are known as separated bike facilities. So these are bicycle lanes separated horizontally and by either a vertical element or grade separated from the roadway, such that you are operating in your own lane. Alternative 1 includes this type of facility on both sides of Battery Street. This image on the right side is just kind of an example of what that looks like. So you can see the bike lane is really on the same grade as the pedestrian facility, separated by motor vehicle travel horizontally with some sort of buffer, in this case, a combination of cobbles and green space. And then shifting to alternative 2. Alternative 2 is what's known as a 2-way separated bike facility. So again, there's an example image just to make it perhaps a little easier to picture. The intention with this facility is to, we kind of planned for and designed it along the west side of Battery Street. We saw a lot of advantages to this. I realize I did not speak to a bullet in the previous slide that's mentioned here as well, and that is regarding parking. With both of these alternatives, there does need to be a reallocation of roadway space. Alternative 1 is able to maintain one side of parking on both sides of the street between Maple and Main Street. Alternative 2 is able to maintain parking on both sides of the street in both blocks. So that's kind of another critical distinction between the 2. We got a lot of community input, stakeholder input about the need for parking, given the density of local businesses and residences in those southern blocks. But the key defining feature here is this 2-way facility, 2-way bicycle facility along the west side of Battery Street. You know, one of the advantages of this is you don't have those intersections north of College Street, where you'll have turning movements across the bike facility that you would otherwise encounter in alternative 1. That was kind of the defining features when we looked at both of these. So kind of the key takeaways when we presented these alternatives to the public as well as our advisory committee were concerns over impacts of parking, as I just mentioned, concerns over traffic operations given the lane reduction from the road diet and changes to signal phasing at the intersections to change up and hopefully improve conditions for pedestrians. Impacts to Battery Park were also a noted concern, given that these do in that north end of the project corridor widen into the park. And we also heard from our advisory committee, as I mentioned prior, that desire to consider an alternative, a third alternative that we just named alternative 3, and that really stemmed from a straw poll we took at our third advisory committee to see if there was a preference, and that was unfortunately pretty much an even split vote. I believe 6 votes for one option and 5 for the other, right thereabouts, and that didn't sit well to us, didn't sit well with us, so we were in agreement that we should consider a third alternative. So we looked at kind of this hybrid alternative that really met what we were hearing from both alternatives in terms of preferences, which was that alternative 1 would be kind of included in this hybrid alternative from Main Street north all the way to Sherman Street. And alternative 2, you can see on the east side of Battery Street here, would be considered from Main Street south to Maple. One of the main motivations for looking at the two-way facility on the east side was to tie into the planned shared use path that's a part of the Rail Yard Enterprise Park project on the east side. I think, you know, those last 2 blocks, we kept the facility on the west side in alternative 2 just for continuity to avoid any sort of crossover. But that is something that could be considered if the recommended preferred alternative is advanced. But for the purposes of our exercise here, we then kind of measured up all 3 alternatives relative to each other using an evaluation matrices that went line by line with our purpose and needs statement. So you'll see those elements here, and we thought for the most part, the middle 3, the comfort and accessibility for pedestrians, the end-to-end bike facilities and connections, and the street ecology into Battery Street's overall design, all really measured out as fairly even between the 2 alternatives. The top one there, corridor and intersection safety for all users, we gave a slightly higher grade to alternative 2, and that was primarily for that one key difference between the two-way facility along the west side versus bicycle facilities on both sides of the street that I mentioned, in that there's much less conflict potential once you get north of College Street for bicyclists in alternative 2 relative to alternative 1 and 3. And then that final bullet there, the providing acceptable mobility for all modes of transportation. This was really looking at the kind of traffic operations and inherent delay that you would experience as either a driver or a bicyclist. So we said, yes, you would receive acceptable mobility if you were kind of a pedestrian or a bicyclist, but no, if you are a driver, and I'll get into that in the slide or 2 here, while alternative 2 and alternative 3 both perform better in that kind of operations analysis metric. So stemming from that same third advisory committee, we also looked at a number of different additional analysis and refinements just to kind of either better communicate or look for areas of improvement. Getting at that acceptable mobility, this is kind of a bar chart of corridor vehicular travel times in the existing conditions relative to the 3 alternatives that were explored. The main impetus for this is that a lot of the turning movements that turn onto those side streets on the east side of the corridor need to be separated from the bicyclist movement in alternative 1, thus causing either longer cycle lengths or different phasing at those intersections, which inherently causes more delay. That's again a little bit less necessary in alternative 2, with the bike facility operating entirely on the west side from College to Sherman Street. And then alternative 3, as you can see, kind of landed right in the middle of both of those in terms of vehicular corridor vehicular travel times. A couple other things we looked at stemming from community engagement as well as our advisory committee meetings was an interest in kind of matching the cross section at the College Street intersection across all alternatives. In our original alternative 2, we actually had a southbound right turn only lane at the College Street intersection along Battery Street. And there was a request to remove that. That was originally in there in the name of traffic operations, frankly. But we took a look at reducing the lane and combining it as a through right lane and then separating the bicyclist movement from the turning vehicle movements, and the intersection still performed acceptably. Another thing that we heard a lot about was, investigating parking opportunities. So we show alternative 3 on the right side of the screen here, where we kind of modified the intended widths of the proposed improvements to be able to fit parking on both sides of Battery Street. So there is a note here that while alternative 3 is shown, it is feasible to maintain parking on both sides of Battery Street in alternative 2 as well. Again, we looked at kind of what could we do to the intended or planned design, what have you, widths of the proposed improvements to mitigate impacts to Battery Park. We sought to minimize the widths to an acceptable degree while still maintaining acceptable separation from the roadway for bicyclists, and then separation for pedestrians and bicyclists in the off-street facilities that are being proposed. We also took a close look at the Main to College block, where we have Burlington Bay and April Cornell. And we want to be sensitive to maintaining parking in that block, given the parking that exists along the April Cornell frontage. All the while being sensitive to the desire to bring end-to-end bicycle facilities through here. So what we've done here, knowing that is a high traffic zone for pedestrians accessing the businesses, as well as drivers and otherwise accessing Burlington Bay, particularly in the summer months, we narrowed the bike facility to the best degree possible to maximize business frontage space in front of April Cornell. And then just to hopefully kind of slow users through that, understanding that there is a little bit of grade along that stretch. So we took that feedback and kind of maximized the potential for all needs in that area to the best of our ability. We also heard some concern primarily in the College to Pearl Street block for the bike facility about side-by-side riding. So we modified the proposed alternative 2 to include a little bit of separation between the uphill and downhill bicycle movements. So we kind of met that, hopefully addressed that need through the refinement of the alternative. And then we looked again in line with that kind of uphill, downhill, side-by-side, bi-directional riding. We also heard concerns about safety. And so we kind of zoomed out to look at kind of the holistic safety considerations of the bike facility and looking at the most prominent crash types for bicyclists, which are generally what are called right hook or left hook crashes from the roadway parallel to the bike facility, and still see a safety benefit to that alternative 2, where the potential for those are mitigated along the corridor for the most part end to end. So all that, again, I'm trying to get through this as quick as I can so we can get to questions. Through all that, it is the project team's recommendation to move forward with the recommended preferred alternative of alternative 2, which is the west side 2-way separated bike lanes. Obviously have this figure here that's zoomed out showing end to end and kind of splits in between College Street and Cherry Street here. But why alternative 2? We see it best meets the purpose and need identified in the very early stages of the project. It has the greatest support from the public based on our online survey. It was endorsed with refinements by the advisory committee to a tune of 8-1 in a straw poll. Minimizes impacts to delay for all modes while maintaining safety for vulnerable users. It has the fewest points for conflict potential between drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and it accommodates design modifications to address the advisory concerns. With that, we'd like to open it up for open discussion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks have.
I think just to clarify, we are not seeking action tonight. In conversation with the chair, we discussed a 2-stage process to allow tonight to really be the vetting of the preferred alternative that we would return following month or thereafter to get your recommendation to go to the city council.
Thank you for that clarification.
Happy to get us moving. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for the presentation and for all the work that has gone into this that likely started before I joined the council. And Chapin, maybe to your surprise, I'm actually very excited and happy about this project tonight. That's for almost no complaints. So,
Keyword almost.
It's his birthday. I want to, told him I feel like.
That way you put the companies.
So, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
looking at those. So there's a couple small things I would just like to ask for a continued consideration. So I would say broadly speaking, after looking at the alternatives and everything, I think this makes a lot of sense for Battery Street. I use Battery Street probably 4 times a day in a car, 2 at minimum. And obviously in summer I walk it. So I've experienced it both ways. I won't ride it, sorry. Maybe Jean will.
It's a stupid thing.
And so the couple considerations is, I agree with you. Surprisingly, even though I'm a very car friendly person, that Battery Street is overbuilt. However, the elephant in the room is what will happen down the line with Rail Yard Enterprise if that project goes as planned, and then Champlain Parkway connects to Rail Yard Enterprise, connects to Battery Street, connects to the Beltline, and becomes a massive corridor to Colchester. I just want us to be thinking about that whole puzzle piece, and I think this helps, actually, I think this helps. But what I would like to say is if we're gonna lose a lane, which I think works, that these sections of greenery in the middle where you have the left protected left, or not protected left turns, but the left turn so that you can get out of the way and let the rest of the traffic go. I think you may need to consider, sorry, I don't have my glasses on, but you may need to consider reducing that a little bit at some of those intersections so that when there is peak backup, that folks are not getting stuck, especially around the Burlington Bay area and that sort of thing. So maybe we can reduce how long those islands are, would be something that I would ask that you consider.
For what it's worth, there's only the one, and it's at Pearl Street on the northbound approach.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's not anywhere else. Okay, great. And then sorry, there were some that were not islands, but I thought you might be able to move some of the yellow lines a little bit. So I'll let you analyze that and see whether that makes sense and trust your expertise. The second is, I'd really like you to think about whether or not the crosswalk at the mobile station at Sherman Street is safe for pedestrians and needs to continue to exist.
Or on Monroe Street, just to clarify.
Monroe, I'm sorry, yes, thank you.
No problem.
There have been, as recently as just a couple of years ago, actually, I think there was even one within the past year, pedestrians get hit there. And at all hours, and it's very dark, and I think Councilor Barlow can attest to when you're coming around that corner from North Avenue. You're moving with traffic, there's cars in front of you, you cannot necessarily see that there's a pedestrian crossing. And so now you've got the added bike path there as well. And we've got other crosswalks that are really close by. So I would invite you to consider whether this particular crosswalk is safe for pedestrians and needs to continue to be there. And then I think the last thing I had is, I think April Cornell was here, I appreciated what they said. I think it's important to preserve as much parking as we can in that from April Cornell all the way down through that section of King and Maple. It's heavily used by tourists and visitors alike, and I think this is gonna help us really slow down traffic and make things safer, because we have a lot of weaving where you have to, somebody's suddenly wanting to turn left in front of Burlington Bay and you're just trying to zoom up the hill and get home. And we have a lot of weaving, and that'll hopefully cut down a lot of that dangerous behavior. And you cannot go up that hill at 20 miles an hour. I'm so sorry, it's impossible. So no, that's probably true. So so other than that, I think I like the idea of having the bicycles together and separated from the roadway and safe, because we just have too many. We don't have enough enforcement. We have one officer out giving tickets for the whole city. And I'm grateful for the work that he does, but and the last thing, I'm so sorry, College Street. And even in your report, you show how high the pedestrian crossing is there compared to the other intersections. And I think anybody who's ever tried to come down College Street and take a right turn onto Battery particularly during summer, it's very dangerous and pedestrians have to be very careful crossing when, even though they have the white signal there and cars are being forced at a green light to sort of push their way through pedestrians, and I've seen it over and over. So that has to be an all stop, I think, just to make it safe for pedestrians and for drivers. That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other comments, go ahead.
Well, I voted for this even though I don't like it all being together, being the bike paths being next to each other. So this is an improvement by making the separation, and I voted for this. Thank you for in the big document, noting the consideration for the Monroe Street improvements there. It's sort of buried, it's hard to find, but we had this meeting and raised the question of that. I think that we have to have a crosswalk at Monroe because people will cross there. It's right in the middle of the park. So the fact that you're eliminating the slip lane will help in regard to that. We'll eliminate that really quick moving out. But just so that other people know, no, we were recommending a raised, whatever you call that. Crosswalk, raised crosswalk was. And I had asked,
another time.
Yeah, I had asked about the signage there, and since that meeting, I do see that the flashing lights, they have signs on both sides. That whether there are signs further afield, so to speak, from the crosswalk. As an example, I cross people at Mad River Glen on a regular basis, and you get warnings where people, you know, like 400 feet. And like at the top of the gap, you've got it, you know, you've got signs saying pedestrians are crossing or noticing that they're crossing, you know, 400 feet from them. And it just, signage, you know, is a double-edged thing, but I think it might be helpful with regard
I agree
to that. And I really wanted to hear some particulars for regarding April Cornell's, you know, just what the particular issues are with, if there are any with this alternative. And I wish that Jack were here because I would have liked to hear his reflections on, okay, we talk about safety in the intersections. So, okay, how does this match that overarching thing? So I don't know if staff and consultants can reach out to just get a reflection, because he made some important, I think, overarching comments, but I don't know
if somebody would share his, if it's allowed to share his contact information, I would happily engage with him and have that discussion with Jason or Julia as well. Yeah, I'd be happy.
I mean, I think he's spoken lots of times in public. And then one other, Hans had made a comment related to aesthetics, but I think more than aesthetics with regard to particularly this one. So it would be great for me to just hear the reflections on that. That's the point. I mean, I was on this committee and I've come to think that the alternatives and the balancing, that this is the way to go.
I think we can answer that last one. Hans brought up. There was,
be quiet.
a little bit of wires crossed. We understood that the fire department no longer needed the space as a fire lane. But we missed the memo that it was still needed as a loading zone. So we just showed it as grass on these, on this alternative, but happy to show that cutout as paved.
So,
yeah, that was, I appreciate it.
I think we got that.
That's an essential element of operating a business.
Absolutely.
So just
Yeah,
to
you got a load of
clarify,
stuff there.
just to clarify, is the fire lane just south of that location still needed as currently marked as a fire lane?
Well, there's a fire lane in front of the Hotel Champlain, and that's mandatory.
We understand, yeah.
Okay,
That's the only access.
so we'll just, we're gonna, the latter was just
And that, by the way, so what would turn into a delivery lay-by is still a standby for the fire department to use as well. It's a second
That
option
makes
to
sense.
have to bring an extra truck.
So we'll modify the drawing.
And I think the aesthetic issues that Hans raised are really in the park
Yeah.
and not in this scoping study.
Yeah, I
So,
think the one thing that we can speak to there and, you know, with these scoping studies, I think the one thing you don't wanna be too prescriptive around is those kind of the minutia and the fine tuned details. But the intention with this, if it were to move to preliminary engineering design, is that it would be in line with the city's Great Street standards. So the same standards that were used to design Bank and Cherry, that were used to design Main Street, et cetera. So less so about maybe the view sheds west.
Yeah,
But it would still be,
realize it's not gonna-
it would be really an end-to-end kind of beautification and update of the street.
So I guess that it is just like April Cornell, if there are some particularity, it'd be helpful if we're looking at discussion now or a decision later. I'd rather get that get the particulars on the table right now so we can consider them. So I don't know if somebody from the
We have,
can pop up.
we have this
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
or we have someone that can speak now?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the image on the right, Gene, the west side of that image. With a few parking spaces in front, but that, basically that pinkish zone that our building abuts to is, that today is 13 parking spaces that we're actively using every day. Both for staff and patrons of our store, we maintain that space, we plow it, we salt it, we paint it. So today I'm seeing it's no longer our space. So I think just representing that concern here to this group as we make these decisions, and as I think April said earlier, it's not in order to stand in opposition, you know, it's to find the right path forward in collaboration with the city and with this group. And I've spoken with Jason before and I've attended some of these events. So we're probably the unique space, this entire corridor in terms of planning purposes, and I think we understand that, so, you know, today is just to show up and voice our.
So there are 13 spots.
Correct.
And that is a mixture of customer and staff. There is reference to the parking in the back as well, which. And so I mean, I guess that it would be great sort of to have staff maybe have just a conversation that would get those issues out on the table and get the conversation.
Staff's the easy part, for sure.
I mean, it's just saying for us to be able to hear sort of what the balances are, what the issues are, not, and you know, where you get to the point where you go, okay, we're either can't make any changes, and these are the reasons in this area. I mean, I just for my purpose, being able to see a deliberative process that really says, we take what your needs are and what the losses are seriously, and we've got these other issues to balance, and we're gonna have this conversation to see if we can make some improvements, have made improvements and changes, so that is possible, maybe. And then, you know, then we go ahead and, you know, have that. So I guess that it would be really helpful in the decision-making process, even if it's all been vetted already, and, you know, at the end of the day, this is what has to be to fit, just to have that explanation, I guess. I don't know if, you know what I'm saying, or trying to.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to hear a little, yeah, so is the primary concern over parking?
Yeah, I mean, that is like the main access to our store there. You know,
And it is something that, you know, we discussed, we met with April Cornell and staff and really tried to do what we could. It's super unique. I mean, it has parking within the public right of way that's private to a business. There's nothing like it on the corridor, and transportation studies like this are always difficult. You're never gonna make everyone happy, but I think what we tried to do here, the best we could, was to propose, I guess, a blueprint or kind of a blank slate to activate the storefront from a pedestrian space perspective, while keeping as many parking spaces on street as we could. So there's, I think, there's eight space there. That was where we landed on that. we can try to see if there's something else that we could do there. I think our options are limited and what we did do, another thing we did do is we shifted the roadway east to provide actually more pedestrian frontage there. That's 16 feet, that pink space there. So there's space to do whatever there, trees, gardens, but yeah, it's not parked cars in front of people.
I mean, I guess I in some, just having us get the conversation, so to speak, and the deliberations, so we can understand, you know, either where you ended up or if you're gonna be re-looking at some things that may be off-site ideas. I don't even, again, I'm not there, but just so that we can have the benefit, so at the end of the day, I can look you in the face and say, we deliberated and we're doing the best thing we got because I got this heavy stone in this arm, or this grandkid in this arm, and this other grandkid in this arm, and I'm trying to walk up these stairs, and this is how I've had to juggle that, and since I've had to carry my grandkids upstairs, it's not easy, but it can be done if, you know, or you gotta maybe sometimes you gotta put one down, right? And that's I want you to know that at least I, and I think everybody else, gave serious consideration. I want the staff and everybody to know that we did the same, and the public to know the same, and that so that I can say, these are the reasons I made these choices, and.
Yeah, I think too, Gene, to that point, what you're seeing is, I guess as the professional consultant on board, is in my opinion, I think really the best of both worlds. I think what you're seeing on the screen represents a modified alternative that's different than any other block. I think you're seeing sensitivity to the parking being maintained along the business frontage of April Cornell, which does not exist north of the project. There is no other on-street parking. There's not currently on-street parking in this block because there is that kind of on-street option right in front of the business. So we wanted to make sure that wasn't just completely removed.
So is there a narrative
You're also-
so do we have, I mean, that I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Understood.
Yeah, I think if you wanna add detail.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not asking for if there is the opportunity and it makes sense to do new looks or refined looks, I think that is great. If you've really exhausted all the possibilities, you know, then let's just lay it out in a narrative form so everybody can understand.
Absolutely, yeah.
that
It just,
would be
I
great.
think, just to answer that question, what you're seeing on the screen, I think is.
It's
to clarify.
It does just, we're talking about a net loss of 5 parking spaces, right? Because you've added 8 to the street.
I did see, well, I wanted to just not question, but just, we counted 9 marked spaces, you said 13. I see 9 marked and we've salvaged 8. Are there 4 kind of informal, unmarked?
So that, the furthest sort of right pink area, almost abutting to Burlington Bay.
Yeah.
There are 4 spaces there.
Kind of up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to the right.
You just kind of go front to back up there.
They're informal.
To back.
Yeah, back, yeah.
So we've got let's just assume we've got a net loss of 5 parking spaces.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I think you guys got clarity.
Are you done?
I think I'm good.
Okay, Merrick.
To wrap up, yes, to the narrative, we can.
Yeah, great, thank you very much.
Yeah, it'll go back to you.
Yeah,
There's a member of the public afterwards who would like to speak if there's time.
Excellent.
I don't really have anything to add. I agree with what's been said. I support this design just based on how you've presented it to us now. But yeah, I'd like to get all the input from now until the next time we meet. And I'll deal the rest of my time that.
You can go there. I have a couple of questions and I'll give you.
Yeah, I just, I guess I would say I see this as a really reasonable effort to be as accommodating as possible to this uniquely sited location. We're talking about roughly the loss between 1 and 5 parking spaces, but also the store is on the corner where there is a lot of parking around the old train station and all behind there, and then April Cornell also has at least 4 or 5 spaces behind the store on Lake Street there. So if we're gonna, you know, I mean, this is, this just seems like the alternative that makes the most sense to me. The one last thing I wanted to ask, and then I was gonna give the floor back to our chair, was about Hotel Champlain and the hotel's right there. And so if we're going down to 3 lanes, I guess my concern is anybody coming downhill and taking a left into the hotel is going to cause a kind of a slowdown of traffic. And so I would just wonder if it's necessary to have maybe a sign that says no left turns, or I don't know, but I've seen, you know, many folks having to turn left there into the hotel, and often it's folks who are visiting from out of town and unfamiliar with the street.
I think that's why we left it as a yellow hatched instead of a solid island.
Right.
So that people turning left could enter into that yellow.
Okay, great, as long as that, I wasn't sure, and as long as that's like super clear to the driver, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think we could introduce, you know, actually like a formalized like left turn markings in there.
That's why I didn't realize that it was there, so thank you, and thank you, Chair, for humoring me.
And so I also had questions about the April Cornell parking. So if it's a lots of 5 spaces, I did have questions about the parking that was on the backside of the store. Is that parking now, or is it?
So there's a gravel lot on the back side of our property, you know, we went to Burlington J, we have parking back there. Our flagship store is on the east side of the building, you know, on the Battery Street side of the building. The entrance to that store is on that side of the building.
But could you, I mean, and I understand the convenience factor of parking, and I don't discount it. In terms of
It's
people.
not really, it's like about convenience for patrons. So it's not really-
Convenience, right. And so if there would, like, would you have to make improvements to get people up to the store from the.
I think it's difficult to go around Lake Street, around your back, and to go up Main Street, right? Especially if walking is difficult for you, if you're older.
Understood.
So if you have to park in the gravel lot and either go up around College or go on Lake Street, which partly does not have a sidewalk. And then you have to get on the sidewalk there and walk up. It's not like the easiest of all.
Okay, yeah, check that out next time. Elgin Street.
Come on down.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that, and I had questions about that. I had questions about parking overall. So you said an alternative 2 with modifications that you would come up with, an alternative 3, that you could maintain all the parking or the parking along the street, like I'm thinking specifically south of College. No,
Maple to Main.
Maple to Main, yeah.
Not all.
All but there's an existing, we counted 42 marked spaces you could maintain if you were to narrow the pedestrian and bike facilities as we showed in alternative 3. You could maintain 39 of those 42 spaces.
Great, that's welcome news. Okay, well, thank you for that. And then I was wondering what the impacts, you mentioned a couple times during your presentation, the impacts to Battery Park. What impact to the park specifically?
More, so this is a good kind of indication here, and it's hard to see on the left side, but the kind of back edge of the bike facility here is the current right-of-way line. So it'd be about 10 feet, and I believe this is actually an existing sidewalk here. So we kind of reduced impacts to the best degree possible to not extend beyond the existing backup sidewalk into the park as they previously did. And so we got that by, and this is very similar to kind of the immediately on the right, the image too. You can see the street buffer here is 4 feet, the bike facility is 10. The separation to pedestrians is 4 feet, and then the sidewalk is 6 feet. We kind of looked at basically what are the absolute minimums that we could comfortably call for a facility to exist at. Excuse me, in other locations. we have either areas of greater separation or wider bike lanes. So we've kind of basically, you know, here we have a 6-foot bike lane in one direction, 8-foot bike lane in the other. Obviously copious amounts of separation from the road, given the lane reduction and the existing significant buffer there, but ultimately, both of these cases, it was a matter of how comfortable are we with narrowing the sidewalk, basically the walking and the biking facilities to accommodate the other needs, whether that's impacts of the park or parking.
It seemed like in that situation, you can see the sidewalk, but really move it in. It's all.
We
parking
could,
space.
we could.
If we needed to. But it
Yes,
seems like
but
we don't.
what you have here on the left side is frankly the lowest impact was.
Okay.
Previously, the sidewalk was moved into the park, so eating up some of the park's like open space.
And the green
It's
space.
a pretty big.
And there's some trees there too.
Yeah, there's trees.
There's trees, and we don't wanna repurpose pervious surfaces with impervious surfaces to the best
Understood.
degree possible, given the proximity to the lake and
That makes
like
sense.
line storage services, storm services.
And then I had questions about stormwater, and I will apologize in advance. We've had a number of big documents to consume in the lead up to some of the bond votes we took yesterday, so I have not gotten to your gigantic document.
The 190-page appendix
Yeah,
one.
but plan to,
Don't worry.
before we meet again. So if I ask something that's in there, about something that's in there, I apologize, but stormwater, I know that we've seen some of the torrential rains we've had in like July where I've had to drive up and that was essentially, it seemed like a stream bed at times. And so how is that getting addressed in this project?
So I think I spoke a little bit earlier just to kind of how these studies don't dive into necessarily the minutia of what would otherwise be considered engineering design details. So as we got into the study, we realized one of the bigger considerations was going to be traffic operations given the lane reduction. And so we didn't necessarily do any sort of in-depth stormwater analysis. But what we have shown here is a substantial increase in pervious surface, thus a reduction in paved surfaces. That in and of itself represents a massive benefit to stormwater because you're inherently looking to accommodate less of it. As far as what could be done in the future. Oh, I heard it almost, it sounded like it was speaking. Oh, wow. No, it's okay. As far as what could be done in the future, I had mentioned prior the Green Street standards. So if you look at like the Main Street design, and perhaps more easy to see is the existing St. Paul Street design. That incorporates a lot of what's called green infrastructure or low impact development at the corners of the intersection along the road. I think everywhere you see green here immediately proximate to the road would represent opportunities for either street trees or to import ground infiltration.
Because I think a lot of that water's coming down Main Street, coming down College Street. It's all sort of ending up on Batter. And I think if we made improvements to the streetscape there, they would be maybe at risk if you had that torrent of water coming down. But I'm sure the engineers would
I will
work that
not
out.
pretend to be a stormwater engineer. I have several colleagues that are, and I would trust them, but the amount of reduction in impervious surface and expansion of pervious surface presents a wealth of opportunities to mitigate a lot of.
Fair enough. And the last question is around the timeline. We know this is with, there's no money for this project now. So what is like even the nearest term thing we might do, right, to realize this project? I mean, and you may not have an answer.
Hot topics that we're
certainly-
flying.
Yeah,
The floodgates are about to widen. Gusher is gonna come, right?
there's, yes, the good news for me is that we have what I believe to be as a corridor study that can generate community enthusiasm for improving stormwater, improving multimodal access, some of the aesthetic improvements. Given that, we will be looking at how this fits in the city's capital plan. We'll see what happens with the vote on town meeting day. I will say that, the 20 million general obligation bond does not include money for this project in there. That said, we'll be looking for grant opportunities. This preferred alternative is expensive. There is the possibility of an interim installation of particular elements of this, and that we're evaluating what those could be and whether or not there could be an initial implementation that was cheaper with some temporary materials. But yes, I think it is fair to say that we're looking 5 to 10 years out.
And with that, I don't have any questions. Any additional questions this time, I'd be able to read the full report and for the final rule. So you had additional?
Yeah, so I live on the lowest block of Battery Street. I really still don't know how you would possibly take away all of the parking on the other side. In front of Indigo, in front of Dinsey, in front of the architect's office. Where do those people park? And all of the employees from those businesses park in the city waterfront area now. But their customers are there all day, every day, weekdays, 9 to 5. There's no parking down there as it is. We can't have things delivered, you know, it's really, really tough.
This is the Maple to Kingsland?
What's that?
Maple.
In between Maple and King. You talk about losing a parking spot at April Cornell. You're talking about taking, I don't know how many, 8 spiders on that whole side in Plan 2.
Yeah, so
the lakeside.
we presented this option here that would maintain parking.
So that was the amended version of alternative two?
I think it would,
It was one of?
I think it is an option.
Yeah, so I guess I can't see,
I guess that's your recommendation, right?
I can't
You'd
see
like
how
to
those
see this-
businesses can operate when all of us down there are already struggling to park anywhere. The upper parts of Battery Street are dramatically different than the last block. It's a night and day difference between those two. The hill on Battery, you got 4 lanes, you got way too much space and then when you get to the bottom, it's like some little old town, which is really great too, because it has so much character. It's historic, you know, it's fantastic. But taking away the parking there, I don't see how they can, how we can manage with losing that many more spaces. It seems like if you're gonna try to do everything, the double bike lane and then 2 lanes of parking plus 2 lanes of road, that it is gonna be really squished. And I don't know if you hook onto Battery or onto Pine Street, what that would look like, but I guess a flow is a flow. I also question, like, what are we doing with the bike path? And I think that's part of the rail project also, is it? Or are we moving railroad tracks? Or, I mean, we just got done doing the bike path. When we ride bikes all the time. We hook onto the bike path to get to the lower block where we are. If you don't wanna ride on the road, you get on the bike path. And I would like to have a bike path in front of us. I think it's really cool, but I can't see any plan losing all the parking on the other side of the street that's gonna work. It's just already tough to find a place to park.
If I may,
Yeah.
it sounds like you would like to see the parking retained like we've shown on the right in this block on both sides of the street.
Yeah, I mean,
Incorporated into the recommended.
I don't know if it's ideal, you know, I too would be supportive of things that work for everyone. But you can't just take away all that parking. I don't see, like I said, the patrons of those businesses already park there and none of the employees, as far as I know, they all walk around across the railroad tracks to get to the city lot. To the Perkins Pier parking lot.
Doran Whittier has a private.
What's that?
Doran Whittier has a private parking.
Yeah, but that's on my side of the street.
Chair, I don't think I don't see us taking away any of the parking other than the 3 spots that you said went from 42 to 39 or something like that. So it might be a moot.
43 to 27.
So it might be a moot
different.
point because.
Just so there is an alternative to the alternative 2 that has
Parking on both
maintains
sides.
the parking on both sides with a reduction of what I understood to be 3 spaces.
And I think that's what I would be
40
supportive.
Right, right.
If it can, does it work to do that? I mean, it's wide enough and all that.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what we've shown on the.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think,
To be fair,
Yeah.
it is not something shown in the recommended
Yeah.
preferred alternative right now, so I understand your concern.
right, I've been looking through, so, right, so I say that option 2 doesn't work
Okay.
the way it was. The other question I'd have in general is, 31 million for this project, what about Lower Main Street? We already have a project. And we found out we don't have enough money for it, but we're considering 31 million for bike accessibility on Lower Battery. So I guess that would be an overall question.
Do you want to address?
Sure, I'm happy, Chair. I think you raise good points. The city has a lot of capital needs. Just because we do a quarter study doesn't mean that we are going to do everything in the quarter. Some quarter studies, like the North Ave quarter study, we implemented the lower cost improvements and paused on some of the more expensive ones. Every grant has a different angle depending on presidential administration's priorities at the time. Having these arrows in the quiver just give us more options as grant opportunities come up.
I understand.
And also redevelopment. And so, City Place with Great Streets Bank and Cherry, we had the opportunity to use some of that private development and TIF money to assist in those, the rebuilds of those streets.
If we did a project like what's been contemplated here, what happens to the bike path? Nothing. Does it stay?
The waterfront bike path?
Yeah, the one that runs.
Yes, this would be in addition.
In addition.
There's been, through the city's walk bike action plan and master plan, is really trying to expand the connectivity of that into neighborhoods in downtown.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on this before we close this item? Seeing none, we'll move on, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
And for being so attentive to a lot of the concerns that has been expressed during the process.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Moving on.
I do have one.
Moving on, we have a hold on, I gotta get back to the agenda.
The parking services license plate reader.
Yes, parking services license plate reader, which I hyped up last night at the end of our. I'm quite excited.
You did what last night?
I hyped it up. I said it was a captivating topic.
I blacked out.
Oh.
No one was paying attention at the end of our council.
I was paying attention. I totally missed that. I was waiting for it to flash and I was listening for the specifics on the slash. That's what I thought.
So
Okay.
I'll just kick things off and say really quickly. Part of the mayor's modern gov initiative and us looking at ways we can offer new products to the public, parking products, and trying to do our work more efficiently. We are excited about license plate recognition technology. Very excited to have Division Director Jackie Asperity here. We can review some of the key points of the memo. There's no action requested. There's no action needed for us to implement, but given the past conversations about privacy concerns and others, we believe we've provided some information that hopefully addresses some of those concerns or all of those concerns. So we're excited.
So just a little summary of what this new technology would do. This makes our compliance a little bit quicker. So right now it takes 2 to 3 minutes to search license plate to see if they're compliant. This would take seconds and make it do an entire street in a minute or so. It'll make the garage go through the garage way faster. This option also gives us different products that we can sell. For instance, a punch card. So business could purchase 100 days of parking, and we can have 4 license plates that take from that 100 days on a daily basis. The other, we hope that this improves compliance, and therefore the budget 265 and 264, which is on-street parking and off-street parking, will also get some financial help for this product. We've written a privacy policy with, city attorney Christian, and I highlighted some of the prohibited uses of data. We have CEDA certified employees who have PIIs, so they would be the license plate and name. This would not be available to the public or the employees that are working out in the field. Basically covers it, probably can answer any questions.
We have the money in the budget to implement here in FY 25. We will be, direct and say that this is what we believe is important to offer new parking products. Post-COVID, most office workers are not working full-time downtown. Offering a monthly permit parking as our only kind of long-term product is not meeting the market need, we don't believe. And we are also seeing lower levels of demand in the garages and lots, and we need to really keep up with the times. So we're hoping that this is friendly to you, and we can, give you whatever updates you're looking for in the future.
I know that originally there were issues raised by the union, so that's one thing that this want you to address. And then privacy, you've addressed sort of the employees. I'm not seeing the protections of our system, of our servers and everything. You have these massive medical data. So the protection of data, can you just talk about the collection of its protection or its lack of being exposed to that?
Yeah, so we get the data from the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System, which is the same system that DMV uses. So I think the safeguards that are in place through that system would translate to our system as well.
We are not saving
anything.
We don't bring any
down.
Okay, so once you scan it and you've made a determination, then
We send off a letter with the address that we get through that federal system.
and that information is gone. It's not saved like a text for whatever period of time. It's gone. And then if there's a challenge and you gotta go to court, you've got certain information that can then
The
Get back
information
into-
that's gonna be on our local servers is a license plate number and a date it was read.
okay.
And we're gonna keep that, I think we said 30
We
days.
do that anyway, right?
So that's what's on our servers. And really the FBI, which runs this whole very secure criminal justice information. We have a locked room, only authorized certified people are able to go into that locked room. We're happy to show you. It's got a whole sign that says restricted space. We got key cards, so everybody who goes in has to punch in. Like, we run a really serious operation here to try to limit any inadvertent access to this CJIS certified information.
Okay, and the union, already expressed concerns and.
Yeah. We have no intention to take jobs away because of this technology. We think it's just going to make the folks more efficient at what they're doing. We just had an appeal earlier today that someone had been parking in the garage for weeks and never paid. So we're not getting everything. It's cold, there's too many spaces, we don't have enough people. So we have no intention of eliminating jobs.
I can't remember what the objections were, but
It was around job security.
okay, yeah.
We originally, when we took over parking enforcement from the police back in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. We brought over, I think it was 5 parking agents. We merged the on-street and off-street system, took our booth attendants merged them with parking enforcement, and we were up to 13 for a time, maybe 14 positions. But we are around 8 to 9, 10 positions now. I will say for FY '26, we are not at this time planning a reduction. In future years after this exists and we experience how it's operating, if there's a vacancy, could we consider a reduction in number of FTEs? We will explore that in the future, but for '26, we've got a lot of learning to do, a lot of experiencing to do. And frankly, we've got to get our feet under us. And we're
Sure, I mean, is it, I don't know if it's a hope, but is it possible that this will, reduce the need? We're gonna put it in the best light for budgets, for people, or?
I'd say it could shift what we have folks do. We have a parking garage maintenance team. We are really struggling with all the antisocial behavior that's happening in the garages. If we have the opportunity, just because we've had 8 to 9 to 10 people doing a certain job, we don't want to keep that job if it's not valuable anymore. However, there's plenty of unmet need within the parking and transportation.
I'm hearing that it is possible that this will increase efficiency enough that will free.
In future fiscal years,
Yeah,
potentially beyond FY '26.
Okay, it would be helpful to get data as you're at, as it's coming in and you're analyzing it in terms of the efficiencies and what it means in terms of the workers needed and the job functions and what have you, just so that we're on a live thing.
And while scanning, I think one of the things to just make a clear point, while scanning can be done in seconds, it still requires, if there's a non-compliance, to get out of the car, to do the manual photos like we're currently doing, place the ticket. It is not a drive-by and automated ticket just shows up in someone's mailbox. So this is
I'm
more.
not hyping it as much then, because I thought it was gonna be, you could just grab down the street.
You could do it with your eyes closed.
We are gonna drive down the street, but then it's gonna go ping, uncredentialed car, and we're gonna have to get out.
Joe,
Sorry.
yeah, I'm done.
So you said the average person says, it takes 2 to 3 minutes for them to run a plate.
Right, so they're typing the handheld
Right.
device, they type in the license plate and then walk to the next car.
Okay, so but so let's say you came up to my car, it would take roughly 2 to 3 minutes to type in my plate and.
See if you're compliant,
Right.
so if you paid, and then move on to the next one.
Okay, and then how on average, how many plates can somebody type in on an average shift ballpark?
That's a good question. We don't have that data because we don't, our system doesn't clock every time they check a plate. I would guess hundreds.
Yeah, so let's say let's
Yeah.
just say 2 minutes, let's say they're super efficient and
Yeah.
fast. That's 120 an hour if they do it the whole time nonstop.
Right.
With no one stopping and asking questions
Yeah.
and other things. So they're probably, and they're doing what, 8-hour shifts, so.
8-hour shifts,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I'm sure they're doing a lot of plates. So then, I guess my follow-up then is. How many plates per hour are you being told by the software company or that, whoever's playing this, that the plate reader reads? I'm just trying to get an idea of like the scale of efficiency.
Yeah, I think, I don't have the data on the percentage, I think it would be, so let's take one level of the parking garage. It will probably take from one end to the other. Let's say it takes 45 minutes. If we use the car, we can go through that in 5 minutes, and if there's 2 people in the car getting out, that is going to, they can do that whole entire section in 10 minutes.
So we're talking about huge efficiency.
Huge efficiencies. The big thing also is residential streets. They can go through the whole street in 2 minutes, drive the whole street, and then turn around, and go back and write tickets if there is not compliant cars. Or they can do it in 2 minutes, everyone's compliant, and then they move on, which would have taken 20 to 30 minutes just to walk the street and check all the cars.
And so, and what is the cost to your, I know you said you have it in the budget, but what is the cost?
The initial startup cost is 50, and then the yearly $50,000.
Yeah, I assumed $50 sounded very generous, but.
The yearly is 15,000.
Okay, and so do we foresee? How do you have projections for increased revenue from finding more offenders and getting them to pay, or?
Yes, so my best estimate, based on some of the other schools that are doing this, is about 25% increased revenue or compliance. So based on a lot of these schools write less tickets. The program that we use also does a lot of schools. They doubled, almost every single school doubled the amount of tickets. Since we're in a municipality, there's a lot more tickets that are written, so I'm guessing 20 to 25%.
So let's be conservative and say 20%. And our total revenue, what does that come out to, roughly speaking?
About $400,000.
I'm sorry?
$400,000.
For our total revenue?
No, total revenue is $1 million.
Oh, so then 20% would be, oh, you're right, $400,000. So you're projecting that we would earn an additional $400,000 in revenue with this investment?
I'm saying it's possible.
Yeah, right, based on the
schools.
Best information you have before you at this time.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like I guess what I would say a smart investment, assuming everybody pays those tickets. I know that some people don't pay those tickets.
Well, people also, once they know that we're doing this and they are parking.
Right, they become more compliant.
Compliant, exactly.
And so then what you're saying though is that we would then most likely at least, and this would probably be up for union negotiation, in the event that we find that we don't need 8 full-time parking enforcement agents because of the efficiency improvements, that we would be able to potentially negotiate with the union to find them similar work in the department before eliminating those positions.
Everything I've done, there has been no layoffs, and I've managed to change in my department by effectively finding opportunities.
Yeah, just I'm like, I'm gonna lay it out here, and I perhaps Councilor Bergman and I are gonna be on a very different page, but the reality is stark for FY '26 and FY '27, and I just don't foresee us as a municipality, and we'll have to see and wait and see what the mayor's budget is in the marvelous nights of May, which is right around the corner. To see like what is that going to look like, because there are quite a few folks who are just we've all been saying this, we're gonna have to make tough decisions, and these are not decisions any of us wanna make, but I'm asking these questions now. So that we can say, okay, if we've got like other critical roles that are vacant, they don't get cut just because they're vacancies, because we might need to move somebody from this efficiency benefit into another role. So I just hope that we all keep that in mind for the marvelous nights of May.
Well, you're looking to buy this like
FY '25.
FY '25, the current fiscal year, but you'll have virtually no experience with it. You'll have just probably you buy it, it's January, if you buy it and get it, you're talking at earliest March, maybe April, probably April when all is said and done. Yeah, so you're looking at April, May and June, 3 months of it. Yeah, so We can have fights about austerity, but they'll probably not be around this year.
The A word.
Well, that's, you know, either we're engaged in
Efficiency,
slashing.
austerity.
No, I mean, if this is efficiency, then you're raising $400,000
Right.
and you're not riffing, and so then you're actually doing something else, so that's not austerity.
Right.
You know, this is not the way that they ran the British health system into the ground, right? So we can have those fights though, but we don't have to right now.
We don't have to right now, we just have to talk about license plate readers.
There you go, I like it.
I just had one last question, which is, forget about the license plate readers for a second. Do the salary and fringe of a and I'm a new counselor, so you know, maybe other folks know this, but does the salary and fringe of a single agent pay for itself over the course of a fiscal year, or is there a loss at all?
Pays for itself.
Okay.
And then so.
And
Yeah.
much more.
So those are the types of
So-
positions that I don't wanna see on the chopping block anyway, you know?
So one of the things we are trying to orchestrate here, and I will say this quickly and then you can decide whether it's valuable or not, but currently this program earns for the general fund approximately $700,000 a year. General fund, as we know, is the most constrained budget, though the parking and traffic budget's not far behind. So what we're trying to do, since we took the gates out of the garages, all the ticket revenue is going to the general fund. Historically, you know, now that there's non-compliance in the garages, we're giving tickets in the garages, but the garages are not getting any of that revenue. Our garages are $3 million in debt. So what we're trying to do is increase revenue enough that we can still maintain the support to the general fund while also supporting financially our garages and try to get that $3 million of debt paid off. So we're trying to find a win-win here, keep staff, pay off some garage debt, keep the general fund fed all at the same time.
I think getting our antisocial garage behavior under control.
Let's just keep this conversation focused, because it's almost 8:00.
Sure.
Very quiet.
Merrick?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I would, I had nothing to say.
Okay. I would have questions about, how many of these, is it like one or do you?
It'll be 2 cameras on 1 vehicle.
2 cameras, so it'll be
To
one
start.
vehicle doing all of this?
Yes.
And with no redundancy? Or can you move the cameras to another vehicle easily, or are they installed on there?
That'll be installed.
Yeah, there's installs on the vehicle, I think. We can always switch them, but we just purchased a new car, so we would put it on that one. We could eventually go to camera mounted on the garage, that's another option, we're not there yet,
Right.
but there are other options too.
This will be the first install, it's relatively inexpensive, if we find the growth in revenue that we're hoping, then we can always buy additional packages.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just thinking about it, like in terms of like recycling trucks, a recycling truck breaks down and you can't make up if the
Right.
tire goes flat on our specialized vehicle to do this, then we can't collect any parking revenue, you know? So I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah.
The other thing, I guess, is, oh, if someone's parked, like, remember they had all those Vermont Strong plates, like.
Yeah.
And so if someone's like parked in a way you can't read, or if there's like a crud all over because it's January and they've been driving around and sand and rough, like half the cars in the streets right now, that one happens.
Yeah, they can read through some things. We have this technology on our handheld devices now. So we can take a picture of the car. It does read through a lot of stuff, but if there's no plate and it's one of the temporary ones in the window, that you'll have to get out.
You just have to stop, so if you go by a car, if it can't read it, it flags it, and it's like a manual check.
Yeah.
Right, and we can decide whether to drive by in order to, you know, keep going or to check all the.
Well, there are a lot of people making their own license plates in Burlington.
I believe so.
So,
It would appear to. Yes.
and that seems to be okay with us.
No, it's okay with the state.
It's okay with the state, okay. But I promise to keep us on track, because
Yeah.
we won't go down that rabbit hole either. And then what's the soonest you could, so you buy it in FY 25 and you get it, like, what's, like, if we said, yeah, it's a good idea, do you need ordinance, do you need anything changed by the
No.
council,
No.
just go ahead and start doing it?
Yes, it'll be about 2 months.
Authority for the state, right? This was also, there was a state issue.
Yeah, we were concerned originally that the state had some language or regulating license plate readers. What upon further review from our talented city attorney team is that they determined that the prohibition around using license plate reader technology was directly tied to law enforcement. And that parking enforcement was not, while related, was not an element. And now that we've split parking enforcement out of the police,
You're allowed to use it.
we're allowed to use it.
So you would do, so are you, do you need action or
We're
you're
not.
just like telling?
It's information only, just because we know the past concern that this committee has had that we wanted to bring into you and be open and transparent before you saw a car with cameras driving around.
Is there more? No,
Just the director's report.
just the director's
Well,
report.
and I'm counselor stuff. I
And
need, 'cause I
counselor
share.
Okay, so let's move on to the director's report.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you for, and thank you for including some, like, there's, you can like set it up yourself, Chapin, but
Yeah.
there was one item that was gonna be deliberative that we moved to the director.
Yes, I had two substantive updates on the director's report. One was the bike share transition that I wanted to let you know that Bird is not coming back. And we're doing a post mortem, like an exit interview with them to understand why they're leaving. And there's not a lot of capacity to launch something this year. So as we mentioned in here, it's an opportunity for the local vendors who have had interest, Burlington Segway in particular, to consider their idea of a local bike share, give that some time, see if it comes to fruition, and we can look at 2026. So that's the thought there. And then as it relates to the fatal Route 127 crash on January 15th, I've input in my written report that we have yet to get the crash report from BPD. We will be looking at it, we have requested it. And we will see what information is in there about factors that may have caused the crash that are engineering in nature. My technical team is looking at the concept of centerline rumble strips or other approaches. And one of the pieces that came out of the conversation that Councilor Litwin started with the Vermont kind of reps, our Burlington House representatives, with some interest in exploring automated traffic law enforcement, which is similar to LPR for parking enforcement, but then gets to the law enforcement, which is currently prohibited in the state of Vermont. Staff is open to this. I've also talked to the mayor's office. We are open to automated traffic enforcement. One of the things we like about it is it removes bias. There's no longer a need for a traffic stop, and a license plate is a license plate. We don't know the color of the skin of the person driving it or the gender or anything else. So, but this would require state action to give us the opportunity to do a pilot or some such thing. So happy to have a conversation now. We don't have a lot of information on the crash at Public Works. Police is still developing the report.
Does anybody have comments for Director Spencer?
I'll be brief. So with the bike share, so they are going out of just Burlington and they're remaining in the outlying cities, towns.
The whole regional bike share with Winooski, South Burlington, Burlington, UVM, and Champlain is all terminated.
Okay, thank you. And then for the crash, yeah, I would definitely appreciate whatever information you can bring back to this committee and the recommendations that your team comes to and the conclusions that we can draw from this accident. I would be very interested in seeing that.
On the bike share, we got a communication from Rick Sharp. He said that we put in an RFP or a response to an RFP with parks. I mean, I think that you allude to trying to engage with local providers, but I think that we should be trying to encourage as much as possible this grassroots effort to fill the need and to bring people in for the conversation. So I just want to say, if there is a place for that conversation to happen here, that would be great. I know the parks are doing it, and perhaps he's only interested in basing it in the parks as opposed to out on the street or something. Maybe we can have that conversation.
Yeah,
and others, Sandy.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep talking about the crash. I mean, Councilor Marlowe and I both represent the area of town that has a lot of feelings and opinions on the Beltline and the speeds on the Beltline, and just wanting to see. I mean, I got educated by you, Chapin, just that I was, I just assumed that was a state highway, and I learned it was not a state highway, so.
Yeah.
So we get to maintain it ourselves, and so what I did see was a very robust community conversation over this, larger than most community conversations. And I think particularly because of how it hit home.
Yeah.
For many people who know the person who survived, who lives in Ward 4. His life is forever changed, and so a lot of people are kind of rallying around this issue and saying, we want Jersey barriers, we want more lighting, it's dark, it's windy, and it's very, very straight. And I think it connects to how you and I first met, Chapin, when I first got elected, which was, the driver who came off of the Beltline onto Plattsburgh Avenue at God knows how fast she was going, and launched herself into a telephone pole on someone's caught air, launched herself on a telephone pole on somebody's front lawn. And that was my first constituent visit as an elected official, was going to her home after she reached out to me and was very shaken, about the experience for her family. And so that's what resulted in the Plattsburgh Avenue speed sign there. So the more we can, I guess, as long as I'm on the council, I really want to do what I can to help move along improving Beltline safety, and hopefully, with Councilor Barlow and Councilor Carpenter and really everyone, because I think we all benefit from that. And there are just so many people who said, I don't even use it, I'm too scared to use it, it's a death trap. When I see an accident, I get scared, I call my parents because they use it every day, and this was someone who was just driving home from work. And like I said, he's alive, but his life is forever changed. So we owe it to our community to once and for all really tackle that and start planning for it, because as I know you know these things take a lot of time and money and effort. So I also appreciated that the state delegation was moved by the event, and actually we lost power in the New North End as a result of that accident. So
They turned up.
yeah, they had to be able to safely deal with the accidents.
Right.
So
Yeah.
thank you. Anyway, I don't want us to lose that thread on the TEUC, because I've made some commitments to the people of the New North End that we will continue to look at that into. So
To be continued.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Councilor updates, I think Ian has one.
Well, it's not an update, but questions. So there are two. One relates to the transportation plan. So I'm going to ask a series of questions that I'm hoping we can get a written response to, and then we can have this on the agenda. And then I just want to go to the point that I had made, that I had asked for in terms of agenda, and like just looking at the big list of things, and serendipitously Ike raised that as well. So wondering about, and I've been being asked about the transportation plan and what is happening, what's the the timeline starting and stopping, and how is it going to be done, the planning process. With regard to that, the connection of it and the bike walk plan, BTV. Included in this conversation or this this report is an understanding, trying to understand what departments are going to be involved and how their roles. And making sure that BED is not overlooked in that, considering the amount of work that they have been doing on EVs. As well as, and I'm so glad that Chris is here because he hangs out long enough that I'll get a chance to talk to him after the meeting, but connection with GMT. And that process, and to the extent that this dovetails with what I was talking to Clayton about in terms of the visioning process, and it dovetails with the transportation options / transportation management, which dovetails with the impact fee study. There's lots of things that come together that would allow us, in the context of even the implementation of the neighborhood code and the South End district, and any other infill that would happen. Tremendous opportunities. So
we'll bring a more thorough update. We have been talking directly with Chris about the upcoming plan, and we have submitted an application to the CCRPC for FY26, as this is our major big ask.
So so all these details in some major thing, ASAP would be great. Having a conversation. Okay, so that is that, and then the other thing I just wanted to do, and I just pulled up our I forget when we did the spreadsheet on our agenda items, but at the very beginning.
You and I have been working.
Well, this is so.
There's that one too,
Here,
right?
so this is the spreadsheet that I just copied from the very beginning of our conversations, and it would be, I think, really important for us to, akin to what Stephen was saying, the good guy was saying, to have a listing and where things are at, and see if we can schedule them.
Our own accountability list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and you know, I mean, I'm just as a point of information, you know, as a like context, I was talking with somebody about solar projects, and I said, oh, well, guess what? You know, we're gonna try to have solar like out here on the belt line, right? Or at least that's being investigated, and also on the dump. You know, I've been working on that for like how many years? A lot of years, and
we're quietly behind the scenes advancing.
And so part of it, I think that when we're advancing stuff, that we shouldn't be as quiet. That's not to say that we're making a big splash, but at the very least, if we're doing things, then we can say that something is happening on the spreadsheet, even if it's just for our information. That's a whole lot better than waiting and then me having to ask or somebody else having to ask. It's there, it's a public document, and we can say, hey, you know what, actually my Brainiac idea, or Evan's Brainiac, or Merrick's, or Mark's Brainiac idea is actually advancing. Who would have known? You know, so that I would really like us at the next meeting.
By the time it advances, usually we've moved on and it's a whole new group of counselors, right, 10 years later.
Or we don't come back to things too, we get an update, and then there's stuff pending, and then we need to loop it back in.
But here are projects that I'm just taking from what Chapin just said are actually things people are studying, people are working, and consequently, we're not just forgetting them, but nobody knows. So I think that's a work that we need to do, and I think it actually needs to be part of every meeting.
It could come in the director's report, and then maybe Chair Barlow can report it out at City Council during
Or, you know, we can minimally create an accountability list or some kind of mechanism to keep track. Right now, Chapin has a list that we go through when we schedule meetings. We go through what the staff, these staff have, because it has timing considerations. We have stuff that's on our list. The reality is, tonight we have a 3-hour meeting. Okay, and stuff comes up, like we need to deliberate on it, and we have other things we wanna do. So we could spend probably as much time as we spend in council meeting just on 2 items. So it's a matter of prioritization.
Absolutely.
Within this committee, but also within the larger council obligations that we all have. So these are the challenges. So I wanted to respond to Steve tonight when he was here, but I didn't because it was public comment. But yeah, I mean, there are things that have happened that are kind of silent that he's working on, right? That Steve wasn't aware of, but there's also you know, things that we could probably be doing were it not for the 50 other things that we're also doing.
And we sort of forget them, because if there are our responsibility to bring forward, but we're focused on what staff is bringing forward, or what what Clayton needs to do, Chris needs to do. And I mean, it's easy for stuff to fall off. Yeah. And that's why we have deadlines. So it would be great for us to have a document that does that. And if and also not just the accountability, because these are things we did, but where there are actions that are being taken, and you can say that, like the study, if the solar is being studied, like what the what the timeframes are, and when a report is expected to be back, and we can always say, hey, can we get an interim or a written thing? We don't need to. It's like a consent agenda. We could also have consent agenda items. That's right. That would just say, hey, give us a report.
We do have a lot of business that comes through this committee, so we could.
I have felt that too, and I would support that this committee can get overloaded, and then when we have a project, it's often a large scale. Like B-Row was an important project, but it was, there was a lot involved in that.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I would support a consent.
Or just more protocol around how we manage the traffic of items that come through, and make sure that we don't lose track.
Yeah, because even if we can't read everything, if it's in the public record, somebody who cares will read it. And that's important to another side.
They definitely will. We'll get the emails.
And rightfully so, because we're still a democracy. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. I'm always telling them, I'm like, thank you for reading it.
So luckily, this is an item that we can take up even offline, because it's really about, it's a meta
It's agenda.
item, it's
Yeah,
agenda,
it's
so
agenda, yeah.
let's continue to talk, maybe you and I
I'm happy to
do that,
work on
we can figure out how we
Yeah.
want to do it.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
You two could do it out.
Yeah, well, no, it's
Because
not.
we need a couple more.
We actually don't fight. If we had Joan here, I'd fight with her, because we fight.
No.
But it's true, but Mark and I don't.
Yeah, we figured it out,
So
so
we worked this out.
we don't agree on much, but we don't fight.
But we don't fight.
Okay.
Some stuff's done.
We agree on more than I was.
Do we get to let Chapin go home for his birthday, or?
I do have a certain amount of.
I have a lot of, I have a one snarky boy.
Chair, would you like to?
I would like to decide when our next meeting is,
Oh,
and then I'd like
geez.
to leave.
Yeah.
Or Chapin's trying to go and
It's all good.
enjoy his
No,
birthday.
it's Thursday is my dinner, so you're kind of.
I'm still, those cupcakes have been eyeing.
It's Thursday your dinner, as in like, it's your turn to cook, but you're at a meeting, so you don't have to go.
Okay, our next meeting,
February 25th is the 4th Tuesday. I know a lot of folks have school vacation.
I do not have a school vacation issue, does anybody else?
I have, yes, my problem is that I have Caleb that whole week. So I mean, I wouldn't recommend you bring it. And because he will take over the meeting. Not in so that's a, if it were later,
In the day?
Yes, if it was like at 7:30, I could do it remote either, or I could zip down. I'm just saying, I just gotta.
Could you do remote earlier or not? Cause.
It will make life
Right.
hard, but I could, but I can make it.
Is there another?
We could. Hear me out, this sounds crazy, I'm sure. Stop having TEUC on the same week as City Council. So we could actually try to have TEUC on the week of the 18th through the 20th.
Isn't the week, your meeting, 18th is a City Council meeting.
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the
Yes.
24th actually is not a city council, so the
Oh,
25th.
God.
We're trying to accomplish what you just asked for.
It's the AI in us.
My calendar's wrong now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Whenever.
let's
No, the day after. I mean, like I said, I could be remote, I could be remotely later.
I don't know, but the problem is if we need staff, starting with 7.
They can put it on the consent agenda.
We can't go 3 hours.
No, I mean,
Do we want to up this for further deliberation?
For further deliberation, I think
I mean, we need to get it in the calendar this week.
Yeah, we do.
Thursday, Thursday, the 20th is a wide open day.
We're 5 NPA in this room.
Right.
But we can find another place.
The engineering room.
Thursday, the 20th, I can do that.
What about you, Mark?
That's the third Thursday? Correct.
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, we can certainly find a space. It might be the engineering conference room.
But it could also be somewhere else too, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you probably.
I will just say, I really like, just with my health issues, like going from City Council on the 18th to CDNR on the 19th to TEUC on the 20th is very hard on me. So I don't know if I'll join you then, if you're gonna do it on the 20th. But you know, I'm flexible otherwise, but I just can't, I'm sorry, I can't do three back-to-backs like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, I often on the fourth week of the month, I have City Council too, and then we have.
I'm not trying to like, I just got my own things.
That's just certain weeks are like that. I don't know what to do.
That next week is just a sort of like a one for me. I can move it later because somebody else.
Monday the 24th is not a council meeting, is that helpful?
Monday the 24th, could you do that? Could you do that?
No, I mean, the problem that I've got has to do with that whole week.
Okay.
I've got the lad.
Maybe we try the 20th.
Well, if we try for the 20th, and if you wanted to remote in.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's other options.
Do my best.
I'm open as well.
New Year's commitment to myself and my doctor, so.
Okay, we need to find a date of location. And with that.
Okay, so I'm gonna put into on the 20th.
Yes, 5:30?
You can always come join us over at the Stone Cottage again.
No.
There's no heat there, right?
They have to, no, that's not the heat, it's they gotta get better temps.
All right, we'll do 2:20 at 5:30. We'll confirm a location.
Okay, if you wanna work.
Yeah. Make sure it has a remote option. Okay.
Okay, very good.
I think one of the
That
members.
will adjourn us at 8:24.
One of the